Explaining the Book of Proverbs, chapter 1 to 31. Proverbs chapter 1, the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs chapter 1 serves as a powerful introduction to the entire book of Proverbs, laying a foundation for understanding its purpose, themes, and urgency. It begins with a clear declaration that these are the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David and king of Israel, establishing both the authority and divine inspiration behind the sayings that follow. The opening verses, 1 to 6, explain the intent behind the Proverbs, to impart wisdom, instruction, understanding, justice, judgment, and equity. They are designed not only for the simple or inexperienced to gain prudence and discretion, but also for the wise to grow even wiser. The passage underscores that true wisdom is not static but continually deepens through attentive learning and the pursuit of wise counsel. At the heart of Proverbs 1 is the statement in verse 7, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." This verse captures the central principle of biblical wisdom literature. Reverence for God is the foundational posture from which all true understanding flows. Without it, one remains spiritually blind and vulnerable to deception. In contrast, a fool, defined not by intellect but by moral and spiritual insensitivity, rejects this foundation, refusing the guidance that leads to life and truth. The chapter then transitions into a heartfelt exhortation from a father to a son, symbolizing the broader relationship between God and his people. The father pleads for his son to embrace the instruction of both parents, presenting it not as a burden, but as a crown and a chain, ornaments of honor and protection. These instructions are not just moral rules but life-shaping wisdom meant to guard the young from destructive influences. Verses 10 through 19 offer a vivid warning against succumbing to peer pressure and the enticement of sinners. The scenario described involves a group urging violence and greed, lying in wait to exploit the innocent and enrich themselves through unjust gain. The father warns his son not to walk in their path, explaining that such people are ultimately setting a trap for themselves. Though they think they are hunting others, they are, in reality, pursuing their own ruin. Greed blinds people to consequences, and in chasing wealth unjustly, they forfeit their lives. The proverb reveals a moral law of the universe: those who live by violence and deceit inevitably fall into the very traps they set for others. The final section of the chapter introduces wisdom as a personified voice, a woman calling out in the streets, pleading with the simple, the mockers, and the fools to turn from their ways. This image of wisdom crying out publicly symbolizes that God's truth is not hidden or obscure, it is available to all who are willing to listen. Yet, tragically, many ignore the call. Their rejection of wisdom is not passive, it is an active choice to resist correction, disdain counsel, and mock truth. The consequences of this rejection are severe. Wisdom declares that a time will come when the tables are turned, when calamity strikes and those who refuse to listen will desperately seek help, but it will be too late. Their suffering will be the natural result of their own choices. The chapter concludes with a stark contrast between the fate of the foolish and the destiny of the wise. Those who ignore wisdom will be destroyed by their own complacency and pride. But those who listen, those who choose the fear of the Lord and walk in wisdom, will live in safety, free from the dread of evil. This final promise is not only about physical security, but also spiritual peace and confidence, knowing one is walking in harmony with God's truth. Proverbs 1 is a powerful call to take wisdom seriously. It introduces the fear of the Lord as the gateway to true knowledge and presents wisdom as both a moral guide and a protective force. Through its vivid warnings and poetic personification of wisdom, it urges the reader to make a choice: to follow the path of life through God's instruction or to follow the path of destruction through foolish rebellion. The stakes are high, and the consequences are real, but so is the promise of security for those who listen. Proverbs chapter 2, the protective power of wisdom. Proverbs chapter 2 presents a compelling and structured appeal for the pursuit of wisdom, portraying it not only as a moral imperative but as a life-sustaining and soul-preserving treasure. The chapter opens with a father's earnest exhortation to his son, laying out a conditional framework. If the son receives wisdom, treasures it, actively listens, and diligently seeks understanding, Then he will come to comprehend the fear of the Lord and gain the knowledge of God. This conditional setup emphasizes that wisdom is not passively attained, it must be sought with effort and intention, like silver or hidden treasure. It requires a posture of humility and hunger, demonstrating that the pursuit of wisdom is itself a reflection of one's desire to walk rightly before God. At the heart of this pursuit lies a foundational truth: wisdom is ultimately a gift from God. While the seeker must be active and disciplined, the source of all true wisdom, knowledge, and understanding is the Lord. Verses 6 through 9 underscore this divine origin, stating that God gives wisdom and stores it up for the upright. He is a protector of those who walk with integrity, guarding their paths and preserving their way. This depiction shows that wisdom is not merely intellectual, it is moral and spiritual, rooted in a relationship with a just and faithful God. The outcome of this relationship is not only knowledge but the ability to understand righteousness, justice, equity, and every good path. Once wisdom is embraced, it begins to shape the inner life of the individual. The heart and soul become a dwelling place for discretion and understanding, which in turn act as protective agents. The chapter moves into a practical explanation of how wisdom preserves and delivers. It shields one from the influence of evil people, those who speak perversely, rejoice in wrongdoing, and deliberately walk in darkness. These are individuals who have turned away from uprightness, choosing instead to live by crooked and deceptive ways. Wisdom enables the seeker to recognize such people and avoid their destructive influence. Further, wisdom acts as a safeguard against moral failure, particularly in the form of sexual immorality. The text warns of the seductress, an immoral woman who uses flattery to entice and who has broken the sacred covenant of marriage. She symbolizes temptation and unfaithfulness, leading her victims down a path that ends in death and spiritual ruin. The stark language used here underscores the seriousness of moral choices and the irreversible consequences of forsaking God's commandments. Those who fall into her trap do not return or regain the path of life, a sober reminder of the high stakes involved in rejecting wisdom. The chapter concludes with a clear contrast between the destinies of the righteous and the wicked. Those who embrace wisdom and live with integrity will walk in goodness and remain secure in the land, a metaphor for God's favor and blessing. In contrast, the wicked and unfaithful will be cut off and uprooted, symbolizing divine judgment and loss. This final section reinforces the broader theme that the fear of the Lord and the pursuit of wisdom lead to life, while rejecting them leads to destruction. Proverbs chapter 2 is both an invitation and a warning. It calls the reader to actively pursue wisdom with the same intensity one would pursue great riches, reminding us that true wisdom originates from God and leads to moral clarity, spiritual protection, and lasting peace. At the same time, it warns of the dire consequences of ignoring wisdom, falling prey to evil influences, moral corruption, and ultimately, spiritual death. Through vivid imagery and moral instruction, this chapter paints a portrait of wisdom as both a divine gift and a necessary guide for righteous living. Proverbs chapter 3, the path of wisdom and trust in God. Proverbs chapter 3 offers a vision for living a life rooted in wisdom, integrity, and faith. Framed as a father's heartfelt instruction to his son, this passage serves as a timeless guide not only for the young, but for anyone seeking a life that is both morally grounded and spiritually fulfilling. The chapter begins with an exhortation to remember and internalize God's commandments. This is not merely a call to outward obedience but an invitation to let divine wisdom shape the heart. By doing so, one receives the promise of a long life filled with peace, benefits that go beyond material success and touch the very quality of one's existence. A central theme in the chapter is the importance of mercy and truth. These virtues are to be held close, bound around the neck and written on the heart, signifying their essential role in personal character. When these traits define a person's life, they lead to favor and good reputation with both God and people. Yet, the foundation of all wisdom lies in trusting the Lord wholly and not relying on one's limited human understanding. This trust must be complete, acknowledging God in every aspect of life. When this is done, the promise is that God Himself will direct one's path, providing clarity and purpose. The passage also warns against pride and self-reliance. It instructs the reader not to be wise in their own eyes but to fear the Lord and shun evil. This reverence and humility are not only spiritual disciplines but are also said to bring health and vitality. In the same spirit, honoring God with one's material possessions, especially the first and best of one's income, is described as an act of worship that leads to divine provision and abundance. These verses make it clear that faith and practical living are deeply intertwined. What one does with their wealth reflects the posture of their heart toward God. Another critical aspect of the chapter is the proper response to divine correction. The text encourages not resenting the Lord's discipline, for it is an expression of His love, much like the discipline of a caring father. This perspective transforms hardship and correction into opportunities for growth and deeper relationship with God. Alongside this is a vivid celebration of wisdom itself, portrayed as more valuable than silver, gold, or rubies. Wisdom is not only intellectually enriching but offers profound benefits: long life, honor, peace, and happiness. She is described almost as a living being, a tree of life to those who embrace her, suggesting that wisdom sustains and nourishes all areas of life. The chapter then shifts to a reflection on God's own use of wisdom in creation. The Lord founded the earth and established the heavens through wisdom, showing its foundational role in the universe itself. Therefore, if God relied on wisdom in His work, it is all the more essential for humans to seek and keep it continually before their eyes. Wisdom and discretion are presented as safeguards, leading to a life marked by security, sound sleep, and freedom from fear. Even in times of sudden trouble or danger, those who walk in wisdom can rest in the confidence that the Lord will protect and guide them. The passage also contains strong ethical teaching about how to treat others. One should not withhold good from those to whom it is due, especially when one has the ability to help. Procrastination in doing good, harboring harmful intentions, or stirring up conflict without cause are all condemned. These teachings elevate daily interactions to matters of spiritual significance, reminding the reader that righteousness involves how one treats their neighbor. The final verses contrast the fate of the wicked and the righteous. The reader is warned not to envy violent or oppressive people, no matter how successful they appear. Their ways are detestable to God. Instead, the Lord's favor is with the upright, His blessing rests on the just, and His intimate counsel is with those who walk in humility and righteousness. The chapter concludes with a striking contrast: while the wise will inherit glory, fools will be left with nothing but shame. Proverbs chapter 3 urges the reader to live in humble trust, moral integrity, and the pursuit of divine wisdom. The promises it offers: peace, security, honor, and blessing are not merely rewards but natural results of aligning one's life with the character and ways of God. Proverbs chapter 4, the path of wisdom and the way of life. Proverbs chapter 4 emphasizes the value of wisdom, the importance of moral discipline, and the necessity of personal responsibility in one's life journey. Spoken from the perspective of a father instructing his child, the chapter blends personal recollection, spiritual guidance, and moral exhortation, creating a compelling case for why wisdom should be pursued above all else. It offers not just philosophical insights, but practical direction for living a meaningful and upright life. The passage opens with a direct appeal for attentiveness. "Hear, my children, the instruction of a father." The speaker urges his listeners to not only listen, but to internalize what is being taught. He frames his instruction as part of a legacy, recalling that he too was once a son taught by his father, likely referencing King David teaching Solomon. This generational continuity emphasizes that wisdom is not just a personal asset but a family inheritance, something precious passed from one generation to the next. The exhortation to get wisdom, get understanding is repeated and emphatic, showing that wisdom is not something passively acquired but something to be actively pursued. It is described as the principal thing, a foundational element of life that must be sought above all other pursuits. Wisdom is personified as a woman, worthy of love, loyalty, and honor. When embraced, she brings promotion, honor, and beauty, symbolized through poetic imagery like an ornament of grace and a crown of glory. These metaphors communicate that wisdom not only guides, but elevates a person's life, granting them dignity and inner richness. The chapter continues by asserting that wisdom leads to life and safety. Those who walk in the way of wisdom will not stumble, their steps will be secure. This metaphor of walking and running without hindrance reflects the confidence and clarity that come from living a morally sound life. The speaker urges the listener to hold tightly to instruction, describing it as life itself. Instruction is not a burden or limitation, but a safeguard and source of vitality. In stark contrast to the path of wisdom is the way of the wicked, which the Father warns against in the strongest terms. He commands his Son to avoid it entirely, to not even set foot on it. The description of the wicked is troubling. They are so committed to evil that they cannot sleep until they have harmed someone. They feed on wickedness and violence as if it were their daily bread and wine. This dramatic depiction emphasizes that evil is not neutral or passive, it is active, addictive, and destructive. To flirt with it is to risk being consumed by it. The imagery shifts again as the text compares the path of the righteous to the shining sun, which grows ever brighter until it reaches its full strength. This is a beautiful metaphor for moral and spiritual growth, a life that becomes increasingly illuminated as one walks with wisdom. By contrast, the way of the wicked is cloaked in darkness, where stumbling is inevitable because there is no light to see the dangers ahead. The contrast between light and darkness underscores the difference between understanding and ignorance, between moral clarity and confusion. The final section of the chapter returns to a more intimate and practical tone. The Father urges his Son to pay close attention to his words and to internalize them deeply. Wisdom, once again, is described as life-giving and even healing. Perhaps the most well-known verse in the chapter is found here: "Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life." This proverb underscores a central biblical idea, that our inner life determines our outer conduct. To guard one's heart is to take full responsibility for one's thoughts, desires, and values, because these ultimately shape behavior and destiny. The chapter closes with a series of imperative statements, urging the reader to put away corrupt speech, to fix their gaze straight ahead, and to carefully consider each step they take. The message is one of intentionality and moral clarity. Stay focused, stay upright, and avoid detours into evil. The repetition of directional language, "Look straight ahead, don't turn to the right or left, remove your foot from evil," highlights the importance of consistency and purpose in the pursuit of a wise and godly life. In essence, Proverbs chapter 4 is a rich and passionate appeal to pursue wisdom wholeheartedly. It teaches that wisdom is not merely intellectual knowledge but a way of life that brings honor, protection, clarity, and ultimately, life itself. By contrasting the path of the righteous and the wicked, and by urging personal vigilance, the chapter calls each reader to make a deliberate choice, to walk in wisdom and live, or to drift into darkness and fall. Proverbs chapter 5, Wisdom of Faithfulness is the Path of Life. Proverbs chapter 5 presents a compelling and sobering message about the dangers of adultery and the importance of remaining faithful, particularly within the context of marriage. Framed as a father's heartfelt advice to his son, this passage serves as both a moral instruction and a spiritual warning, emphasizing the far-reaching consequences of sexual immorality. With poetic language and vivid imagery, the text urges the reader to embrace wisdom, avoid temptation, and find joy and satisfaction in a faithful marital relationship. The chapter begins with a call to listen attentively to wisdom and understanding. This introduction sets the tone for what follows, highlighting the significance of moral discernment and spiritual insight. The Father's instruction is not casual advice, it is a passionate appeal to preserve discretion and to keep knowledge close. These qualities serve as protection against the subtle and seductive lure of immoral behavior. Central to the passage is the description of the immoral woman, whose lips drip honey and whose speech is smoother than oil. At first glance, she appears enticing and pleasing, but the text quickly reveals the deception behind her charm. Her end is bitter, described as wormwood, an herb known for its intense bitterness, and she is likened to a double-edged sword, symbolizing the pain and danger that accompany her path. The consequences of involvement with her are severe: death, destruction, and a descent into hell. Her life is marked by instability and confusion, and those who follow her do not realize the peril they are in until it is too late. The father's warning becomes even more urgent as he exhorts his children to stay far from such temptation. He warns that the price of such sin is the loss of honor, the surrender of one's best years to others, and the squandering of wealth and labor to strangers. Ultimately, those who fall into this trap are left with deep regret, lamenting their rejection of instruction and correction. The emotional and physical toll of their choices becomes evident, and they find themselves on the brink of ruin, disgraced before their community. This part of the passage serves as a powerful reminder of how sin not only affects personal life but also public reputation and legacy. In contrast to the destructive nature of adultery, the text turns to a celebration of marital faithfulness. Using the metaphor of drinking water from one's own cistern, the father encourages his son to find fulfillment in his own wife. This imagery suggests exclusivity, purity, and the refreshing, life-giving nature of a devoted marital relationship. The language becomes intimate and joyful as the writer urges the son to rejoice with the wife of his youth and to be continually enraptured by her love. The relationship is described in tender and affectionate terms, portraying a faithful marriage not as a duty, but as a source of lasting delight and satisfaction. The chapter concludes with a solemn reflection on accountability and the consequences of sinful choices. It reminds the reader that every path is seen by the Lord and that no action is hidden from His view. This awareness of divine oversight adds weight to the earlier warnings, underscoring the spiritual dimensions of one's moral decisions. The sinner becomes ensnared by his own iniquities, trapped in the very cords of sin he has chosen. Without instruction and correction, he strays into ruin, led by his own folly. Ultimately, Proverbs chapter 5 is a powerful moral lesson about the perils of adultery and the value of fidelity. It contrasts the destructive lure of illicit relationships with the beauty and sanctity of a faithful marriage. The passage not only addresses external behavior but also speaks to the inner condition of the heart, whether it is guided by wisdom or ruled by impulsive desires. Through vivid warnings and uplifting encouragement, it calls the reader to choose the path of life, wisdom, and lasting joy. Proverbs chapter 6, Lessons in Integrity, Diligence, and Moral Purity. Proverbs chapter 6 presents a series of moral and practical teachings, written in the style of a wise father addressing his son. The passage offers insight into how one should live wisely, avoid destructive behaviors, and stay on the path of righteousness. This chapter weaves together themes of financial responsibility, the dangers of laziness, the character of the wicked, and the severe consequences of adultery. Each section serves as a warning, emphasizing the consequences of unwise actions and urging the reader to choose wisdom and integrity. The chapter begins with a strong warning against becoming surety for another person, that is, making yourself financially responsible for someone else's debt. Solomon warns that such a promise, even if made out of friendship or goodwill, can become a trap. If someone finds themselves in such a situation, they are advised to act quickly and humbly to free themselves from the obligation. The language used is urgent and vivid: give no sleep to your eyes, and deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter. This highlights how dangerous and binding a financial promise can be, and it teaches that words have consequences. The wise person must be cautious with commitments and avoid being entangled in financial obligations that could bring harm. Following this, the passage turns its attention to laziness, using the ant as a model of diligence and wisdom. The ant, without needing supervision or instruction, prepares for the future by gathering food in the right season. In contrast, the sluggard delays, indulges in sleep and rest, and eventually faces poverty as a result. Solomon's words here are sharp and meant to jolt the lazy into awareness. Poverty will come like a prowler, sudden and threatening. This imagery reinforces the idea that small habits of neglect and delay can accumulate into serious hardship. The lesson is that personal responsibility and hard work are vital to avoid ruin. The chapter then describes the character of a wicked and worthless person, emphasizing how such an individual uses deceitful and manipulative behavior to cause harm. With secretive gestures, perverse speech, and a heart filled with evil intentions, this person spreads conflict and discord. The consequence is swift and final. His downfall will come suddenly, and there will be no remedy. This section serves as both a warning and a reflection on the nature of evil. It is not just the actions but the intentions of the heart that define wickedness. Discord, especially when sown among people, is presented as deeply offensive to God. This point is underscored in the next section, which lists 7 things that God hates. These are not just actions but attitudes and patterns of behavior: pride, lying, violence against the innocent, wicked schemes, eagerness to do wrong, false testimony, and sowing discord among brothers. The list is comprehensive and cuts to the heart of destructive human behavior. These things are described as abominations, extremely offensive to God, because they harm others, break trust, and disrupt the harmony of communities. It emphasizes that God is not only concerned with personal morality but with how individuals treat others. The final portion of the chapter offers a powerful and vivid warning against adultery. The fatherly voice returns, urging the son to heed the teachings of both father and mother. These teachings are described as a constant guide, leading, protecting, and speaking to the heart. Sexual immorality is portrayed as a seductive trap, where flattering words and outward beauty can lead a man to ruin. The consequences of adultery are described in terms of both moral and practical destruction. The imagery of fire and hot coals illustrates that engaging in such sin will inevitably bring pain and consequences. Unlike theft, which might be forgiven or repaid, adultery stirs a husband's jealousy to the point of vengeance. No amount of compensation will appease his anger. The message is clear, the risks are high, and the damage is lasting. Proverbs 6, taken as a whole, offers a powerful blueprint for wise living. It calls for integrity in financial dealings, diligence in work, uprightness in character, and purity in relationships. It warns that foolish decisions, whether made in haste, laziness, deceit, or lust, lead not just to personal failure but to deep and lasting harm. By urging the reader to pursue wisdom and avoid the snares of the foolish, the chapter reflects the central theme of the book of Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and those who live by his principles will find life and safety. Proverbs chapter 7, guard your heart from temptation. Proverbs 7 is a deeply instructive passage that serves as both a warning and a plea for moral integrity, particularly in the face of sexual temptation. The chapter unfolds as a father speaking to his son, urging him to embrace wisdom and keep God's commandments close to his heart. This appeal to personal discipline and spiritual attentiveness is not abstract, it is anchored in the reality of human weakness and the cunning nature of temptation. The father begins by urging his son to treasure his teachings and treat them as invaluable. He uses vivid metaphors, writing them on the tablet of the heart, binding them on the fingers, to stress how internalized and ever-present these commands must be. Wisdom is to be as close and trusted as a family member. This deep internalization is meant to serve one purpose: protection. Specifically, protection from the immoral woman, a figure who represents more than just a literal person. She embodies the allure of sin, especially sexual immorality, which flatters, entices, and ultimately destroys. The father then recounts a scene he observes from his window. He sees a young man, described as simple and devoid of understanding, wandering into danger. The narrative unfolds slowly, showing the man walking near the woman's corner, at night, in secrecy. This is a picture of vulnerability and ignorance. The time of day, twilight, evening, and then full darkness, mirrors his descent from innocence to sin. There is no accident here. The path he takes and the choices he makes are intentional, if naive. He is on the road to destruction without realizing it. What follows is a detailed and unsettling depiction of the seductress. She is dressed provocatively, speaks boldly, and is described as restless and rebellious. She uses charm and manipulation, even cloaking her seduction in religious pretense by referencing peace offerings and vows. Her bed is perfumed and adorned, Her words are flattering and convincing. She assures the young man that they will not be caught. Her husband is away, she says, and will not return soon. The seduction is total. She appeals to his senses, promises pleasure, and removes any fear of consequence. This woman's approach is not merely about desire, it is about control and deception. Her methods are deliberate, and her speech is calculated to lower his defenses. The young man yields quickly. The father uses disturbing imagery to describe what follows. The man is like an ox being led to the slaughter, a fool being disciplined, a bird flying into a trap. These are not the images of a romantic or harmless encounter, they are the pictures of someone walking straight into death. The line "he did not know it would cost his life" delivers the punch of the entire chapter. What seems like a fleeting pleasure is, in fact, a fatal mistake. In the closing verses, the father turns from storytelling to direct admonition. He warns all his children not to let their hearts be drawn to her ways, not to even step onto her path. The tone is urgent and universal. Many strong men, he says, have been brought down by her. Her house does not lead to love or joy, it leads to hell, to death, to spiritual ruin. The implication is clear: sexual immorality is not merely a personal failing, it is a destructive force that ensnares and kills. Proverbs 7 is more than an ancient warning about adultery. It is a timeless teaching about the nature of temptation and the critical importance of wisdom. The passage confronts readers with the sobering truth that sin often disguises itself as pleasure, that folly often wears the mask of freedom, and that even the strong can fall if they neglect the counsel of God. The message is urgent: guard your heart, cherish wisdom, and do not be deceived. What may seem desirable in the moment can cost far more than one ever intended to pay. Proverbs chapter 8, the excellence of wisdom in creation and life. Proverbs chapter 8 is a rich and poetic passage that presents wisdom as a living, active voice calling out to humanity. In this chapter, wisdom is personified as a woman who publicly offers her guidance, truth, and value to all who are willing to listen. This portrayal is not merely symbolic but serves as a theological and moral invitation for people to pursue what is lasting, righteous, and aligned with the purposes of God. From the outset, wisdom is described as crying out in public spaces, on high hills, at the crossroads, and by the gates of the city. These locations are significant because they represent places of decision-making, authority, and community interaction. Wisdom does not hide in private corners. She calls out to all, including the simple and the foolish, urging them to learn prudence and understanding. Her message is accessible and clear, aimed at every person regardless of their level of education or social standing. The tone of the passage suggests urgency and deep concern, as if wisdom knows the dire consequences of being ignored. The value of wisdom is emphasized through comparison with material wealth. She urges people to choose instruction over silver and knowledge over fine gold. Rubies, one of the most precious stones in the ancient world, are declared inferior to wisdom. This emphasis underscores a fundamental biblical truth, that spiritual and moral insight is more valuable than any worldly possession. Wisdom's words are righteous and true, never crooked or perverse. She speaks plainly to those who seek understanding, and her counsel leads to a life of integrity and discernment. In the middle section of the chapter, wisdom describes her role in the governance of the world. She claims to dwell with prudence and to possess knowledge, discretion, and strength. Through her, kings reign, rulers enact justice, and leaders govern wisely. This is not just an idealistic view of politics but a declaration that true authority and just leadership are rooted in godly wisdom. Those who seek and love wisdom will find her, and with her come enduring riches, honor, and righteousness. Her path leads through justice and moral uprightness, offering not just prosperity but ethical wealth, a treasure that aligns with God's character. Perhaps the most profound portion of Proverbs 8 is found in verses 22 to 31, where wisdom speaks of her origin and her presence at creation. She declares that the Lord possessed her at the beginning of His way, before the world began. This poetic expression suggests that wisdom is not a later addition to God's work but was foundational, present before the oceans, mountains, skies, and even the dust of the earth were formed. Wisdom was beside God like a master craftsman, rejoicing in the creation and especially delighting in humanity. This passage elevates wisdom to a cosmic level, giving it eternal significance. Many Christian theologians have drawn parallels between this description and the Logos, the Word of God, in John 1, seeing in this chapter a foreshadowing of Christ, who embodies divine wisdom. The chapter concludes with a passionate plea: listen, be wise, and do not ignore wisdom's instruction. Those who heed her will be blessed, finding life and favor from the Lord. In contrast, those who reject or hate wisdom harm themselves and ultimately choose death. The dichotomy is stark but intentional. Proverbs often sets before the reader two paths, one of wisdom and life, and one of folly and destruction. Here, that choice is made even more urgent, as wisdom herself warns that to ignore her is to despise one's own soul. In summary, Proverbs 8 is a compelling call to embrace divine wisdom, which is more valuable than riches, foundational to just leadership, present in creation, and essential for life. It portrays wisdom not as abstract theory but as a living voice offering truth, guidance, and blessing to those who will listen. The chapter invites every reader to seek wisdom diligently, to treasure it above all else, and to walk in the fear of the Lord, because to do so is to choose life itself. Proverbs chapter 9, the choice between wisdom and folly. Proverbs chapter 9 presents a vivid and poetic contrast between the way of wisdom and the way of folly, using the powerful literary device of personification. It serves as a climactic conclusion to the first major section of the book of Proverbs, which is dedicated to urging the reader, particularly the young and inexperienced, to pursue wisdom above all else. The chapter frames this choice as a matter of life and death, portraying wisdom and folly as two women who each extend an invitation to the simple, but whose destinations could not be more different. The chapter begins with wisdom as a noble and industrious woman who has built her house and prepared a lavish banquet. The reference to 7 pillars emphasizes completeness and stability, suggesting that the house of wisdom is secure, well-structured, and enduring. She has not only built a place of shelter but also prepared a rich feast, slaughtering animals, mixing wine, and setting her table, indicating abundance, nourishment, and hospitality. Wisdom actively seeks out the simple, sending out her maidens to invite those who lack understanding. Her call is clear and generous: come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Forsake foolishness and lev, and go in the way of understanding. Here, the invitation is more than just a meal, it is a metaphor for accepting instruction, embracing truth, and choosing a life that is grounded in moral and spiritual discernment. In the middle portion of the chapter, the tone shifts to discuss how different types of people respond to correction. This section is essential because it reveals that wisdom is not just about knowledge, but about character. A scoffer, someone who mocks or resists truth, rejects correction and becomes hostile when rebuked. Trying to correct such a person often results in harm or scorn. In contrast, a wise person welcomes correction and grows from it. This distinction emphasizes that the pursuit of wisdom requires humility and a willingness to learn. The wise become wiser when taught, the just increase in learning. The key verse that follows: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding, serves as the theological foundation for all wisdom literature. It reminds the reader that true wisdom starts with a right relationship with God, rooted in reverence, awe, and submission. This fear is not about terror but about recognizing God's authority and moral order. The benefits of wisdom are also personal and profound. It brings long life, multiplies days, and leads to greater fulfillment. But the chapter also warns that everyone must bear the consequences of their choices. If one is wise, the reward is personal. If one scoffs, they alone will suffer the outcome. In stark contrast to wisdom, the final section introduces folly, depicted as a loud, ignorant, and seductive woman. Unlike wisdom, who builds and prepares, folly simply sits and calls out from the same elevated places. She mimics wisdom's invitation with almost identical words: whoever is simple, let him turn and hear. However, the content of her offer is strikingly different. Stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. Her appeal is to forbidden pleasure and secrecy, enticing the naive with promises of satisfaction that defy moral boundaries. But while her words may sound inviting, they are deeply deceptive. The chapter closes with a grim warning. Those who accept her invitation are unaware that her house is filled with the dead, that her guests dwell in the depths of Sheol. This chilling image reinforces the ultimate danger of choosing folly. What seems sweet and pleasant in the moment leads to spiritual and even physical ruin. Proverbs 9, therefore, presents the reader with a moral and existential crossroads. Wisdom and folly both extend their hands, but their destinations are diametrically opposed. One leads to life, the other to death. The chapter does not leave room for neutrality, it demands a decision. Through rich imagery and moral clarity, it urges the reader to embrace wisdom, not merely as a set of intellectual principles, but as a life-giving path rooted in the fear of the Lord. Proverbs chapter 10, Solomon's Guide to Wisdom and Righteous Living. Proverbs chapter 10 marks a significant shift in the book of Proverbs, transitioning from extended teachings to short, practical sayings attributed to Solomon. Each verse stands almost independently, offering wisdom in compact, contrasting couplets. This chapter introduces a recurring structure, statements that compare the outcomes of the righteous and the wicked, the wise and the foolish, the diligent and the lazy. These observations are not merely moral reflections but are deeply practical, intended to guide everyday behavior and decision-making. At the heart of this chapter lies the theme of contrast. The righteous bring joy to their families, especially parents, while the foolish bring grief. Wisdom, according to Solomon, is not only a personal virtue but also a source of blessing to others. A wise son brings gladness to his father, while a foolish one becomes a burden to his mother. This distinction underlines the communal and generational impact of personal choices. In similar fashion, material wealth obtained through wicked means is dismissed as ultimately useless, unable to save from death or divine judgment. In contrast, righteousness has enduring value, it leads to life and provides divine protection. Another dominant theme is the value of diligence and the danger of laziness. The diligent are likened to those who gather during harvest, seizing opportunities and gaining reward, while the lazy are compared to those who sleep during the most critical time and therefore bring shame. Hard work is praised as a path to wealth and honor, while idleness leads to poverty and disgrace. This theme is not purely economic, it reflects a moral order in which God favors those who act responsibly and work with integrity. Speech also plays a central role in this chapter. The way one uses words reveals character and shapes destiny. The mouth of the righteous is described as a fountain of life, bringing wisdom and benefit to others, while the words of the wicked are associated with violence and destruction. A wise person speaks carefully, restraining their tongue, whereas a fool talks excessively and carelessly, leading to ruin. Gossip, slander, and hidden hatred are condemned, while love, which covers all sins, is exalted as a force for peace and reconciliation. This emphasis on speech highlights the power of words to either build up or tear down individuals and communities. Proverbs 10 also emphasizes divine justice. God is portrayed as active in the world, rewarding the righteous and frustrating the plans of the wicked. The Lord provides for those who walk in righteousness and ensures that their hope leads to gladness. Conversely, the wicked are destined for destruction. Their fears come true, their names rot, and their hopes perish. While storms may come, the righteous stand firm with an everlasting foundation, whereas the wicked are swept away. This portrayal affirms a moral universe governed by divine law, where actions have consequences that extend beyond human control. The chapter also touches on themes of legacy and influence. The memory of the righteous is said to be blessed, suggesting that a life of wisdom and goodness leaves a lasting, honorable impression. In contrast, the name of the wicked decays over time, forgotten or remembered with contempt. The righteous are not only preserved by God but are also a source of life, nourishment, and wisdom to others. Their lips feed many, offering insight and encouragement. Meanwhile, fools not only harm themselves through ignorance but also fail to benefit those around them. Throughout Proverbs 10, the underlying message is that life offers clear moral choices, and those choices produce distinct outcomes. Wisdom, righteousness, diligence, and self-control lead to life, honor, and lasting security. Foolishness, wickedness, laziness, and deceit lead to ruin, shame, and loss. These proverbs are not abstract ideals but concrete guidelines for living a life that is both morally upright and practically wise. Solomon's teachings in this chapter are as relevant today as they were in ancient Israel, offering timeless truths about human character, responsibility, and the consequences of our actions. Proverbs chapter 11, the rewards of righteousness and the ruin of wickedness. Proverbs chapter 11 presents a rich tapestry of moral instruction, wisdom, and divine principles, drawing a sharp contrast between the righteous and the wicked, the wise and the foolish, the generous and the greedy. At its core, this chapter teaches that living with integrity, humility, and righteousness not only pleases God but also brings tangible benefits in this life and beyond. Conversely, dishonesty, pride, and wickedness lead to ruin, shame, and ultimately death. The chapter opens with a statement about honesty in daily dealings. Dishonest scales are an abomination to the Lord, but accurate weights delight him. This sets the tone for the rest of the passage, emphasizing that God is deeply concerned with justice, fairness, and truth. It is not merely outward religious behavior that matters, but the ethical choices made in everyday life. The prideful, it says, are destined for disgrace, while humility leads to wisdom. This principle reflects a recurring biblical truth: God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. The contrast between integrity and perversity underscores that righteous living is not just morally superior but also practically beneficial. Those who live honestly are guided safely, while the deceitful ultimately self-destruct. Wealth and power, often seen as signs of success, are shown here to be unreliable, especially in the day of wrath. Material possessions cannot save a person from judgment, only righteousness can deliver. This message cuts against the grain of a materialistic worldview, reminding readers that spiritual character outweighs financial gain. The chapter reiterates this truth by showing that the righteous are consistently delivered from trouble, while the wicked face the consequences of their own actions. Even death offers no escape for the wicked; their hopes die with them. In contrast, the legacy of the righteous endures. The power of words also takes center stage. A hypocrite can destroy a neighbor with their speech, but knowledge and wisdom can bring deliverance. The impact of moral character extends to the community level as well. When the righteous prosper, the entire city rejoices; when the wicked perish, there is relief and celebration. This shows that righteousness is not just a personal virtue but a communal blessing. The moral choices of individuals ripple outward, affecting families, cities, and nations. The value of restraint, discretion, and faithfulness is emphasized in practical terms. Gossip and slander are condemned, while those who keep confidences are praised. Wisdom is found not in speaking often, but in knowing when to stay silent. Furthermore, guidance and wise counsel are seen as essential for success. Without it, people stumble; with it, there is safety. Financial wisdom is also addressed. Those who guarantee debts for strangers are warned of inevitable suffering, while those who avoid such risks are considered prudent. The text contrasts the gracious and the ruthless, the merciful and the cruel. Kindness, it says, is not only a blessing to others but a benefit to oneself, while cruelty backfires, bringing trouble even to one's own body and soul. Righteousness is portrayed as a seed that yields a reliable reward, whereas wickedness is like deceptive labor, empty and fleeting. Pursuing good leads to life; chasing evil leads to death. God is not indifferent to character. He detests a corrupt heart but delights in those who live blamelessly. Even if the wicked unite, their judgment is certain. Meanwhile, the descendants of the righteous will be delivered, suggesting that righteousness has generational impact. One of the more vivid images in this chapter compares a beautiful woman without discretion to a gold ring in a pig's snout, valuable, but placed foolishly. This graphic metaphor illustrates that beauty without wisdom is wasted, or even grotesque. The desires of the righteous, the text says, are good, while the expectations of the wicked are rooted in wrath. A surprising paradox appears in the teaching that generosity often leads to increase, while hoarding leads to poverty. The one who scatters actually gains more, and the one who refreshes others is himself refreshed. This reveals a divine economy, where blessing comes through giving, not keeping. Withholding resources brings curses, while fair dealing brings blessing and respect. Trust in wealth is portrayed as dangerous. Those who rely on riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like healthy plants. Causing turmoil in one's own household leads to ruin, while wisdom leads to honor and leadership. The legacy of the righteous is not only enduring but life-giving, a tree of life to others. Those who influence others toward righteousness are called truly wise. The chapter concludes with a sobering thought: if even the righteous face consequences and refinement in this life, how much more will the wicked and sinners be held accountable? This closing verse emphasizes the seriousness of God's justice and reinforces the call to live righteously, not only for the blessings it brings, but to stand blameless before a just and holy God. Proverbs 11 ultimately calls readers to live lives marked by integrity, generosity, humility, and wisdom. It challenges prevailing ideas of success and points to a higher standard, God's standard, by which people and their actions are judged. It is a timeless reminder that righteousness exalts not only individuals but entire communities, and that the path to life, peace, and favor with God is paved with moral courage, self-control, and a heart aligned with divine truth. Proverbs chapter 12, Wisdom and righteousness lead to life. Proverbs chapter 12 presents a vivid tapestry of wisdom literature that contrasts the lives, behaviors, and outcomes of the righteous versus the wicked, the wise versus the foolish, and the diligent versus the lazy. It emphasizes that a life built on righteousness, integrity, and humility leads to stability and blessing, while a life marked by deceit, pride, and wickedness leads to downfall and disgrace. The chapter opens with a bold statement that loving instruction is a mark of true knowledge, while those who reject correction are labeled as stupid. This bluntness sets the tone for the rest of the Proverbs, which do not shy away from calling out foolishness and wrongdoing. Throughout the chapter, wisdom is equated with humility and the willingness to be corrected, while folly is often associated with arrogance and self-deception. A person who thinks they are always right is considered foolish, while the wise are those who listen to counsel and are slow to display their anger. Righteousness is portrayed as a strong foundation that endures through trials. Those who live righteously are likened to a house that stands firm, while the wicked are overthrown and disappear. This imagery emphasizes the enduring nature of a life built on virtue. The righteous person is rooted, fruitful, and stable, whereas the wicked constantly seek what others have and ultimately bear no lasting fruit. Even their supposed acts of kindness are laced with cruelty, revealing a corrupt nature that cannot truly care for others. The power of words is another central theme in this chapter. Words are shown to have real consequences. They can ensnare or deliver, wound or heal, deceive or promote truth. The tongue of the wise is a source of life and healing, while the speech of fools and the wicked is violent and destructive. A truthful person is described as enduring forever, while the lying tongue is fleeting and displeasing to God. The importance of truthfulness and integrity in speech is highlighted repeatedly, as God delights in those who speak truthfully and despises deceitful lips. Hard work and diligence are praised as essential virtues. The diligent are promised leadership and satisfaction, while laziness leads to forced labor and missed opportunities. A lazy man may go so far as to hunt but not bother to cook his catch, a metaphor for someone who starts tasks but lacks the discipline to finish them. Diligence is described as a precious possession, something that not only brings material success but also speaks to a person's character. The chapter also speaks to the inner life of a person. Anxiety in the heart leads to depression, but a good word, an encouraging, timely piece of truth, can lift the spirit. This highlights the importance of emotional care and the role of others in bringing healing through kind and wise speech. In another verse, the text notes that the righteous man even cares for the life of his animal, showing that righteousness affects not just how one treats people, but all living things. Social wisdom is also a feature of Proverbs 12. The righteous are advised to choose their friends carefully because the company one keeps has the power to lead them astray. Reputation, too, is addressed. People are praised for their wisdom, but those who honor themselves while living in poverty are critiqued. It's better to live modestly with substance than to appear important while lacking basic needs. In the end, Proverbs 12 draws a clear and uncompromising line between the way of righteousness and the way of wickedness. Righteousness brings life, joy, stability, and favor with God. Wickedness leads to instability, deceit, ruin, and divine condemnation. The choice between these paths is not merely a matter of behavior, but of character and the condition of the heart. The chapter encourages readers to embrace correction, speak truth, work diligently, and live with integrity, values that create a life of true strength and enduring worth. Proverbs chapter 13, the rewards of wisdom and the cost of folly. Proverbs chapter 13 presents a rich tapestry of wisdom, offering insights into the daily choices that shape a person's character and destiny. This chapter, like much of the book of Proverbs, contrasts the lives of the wise and the foolish, the righteous and the wicked, the diligent and the lazy. Each verse serves as a concise yet profound statement about the consequences of moral and practical decisions. The chapter begins by highlighting the importance of teachability. A wise son listens to his father's instruction, while a scoffer refuses correction. This sets the tone for the rest of the chapter. Wisdom is not just about knowledge, but about humility and a willingness to be corrected. The theme of speech follows closely. Words are shown to have power. Those who speak wisely will benefit from their words, while those who speak recklessly will suffer. Guarding one's mouth is equated with preserving one's life, emphasizing the value of self-control and thoughtful communication. Laziness is sharply criticized in contrast to diligence. The lazy person desires good things but has nothing, while the diligent are enriched. This reflects a broader theme throughout the chapter. Effort, discipline, and virtue bring reward, while foolishness and vice bring ruin. The righteous person is portrayed as someone who loves truth and integrity, whereas the wicked person is marked by shame and disgrace. Righteousness serves as a kind of shield, protecting the upright, but sin leads to downfall. Several proverbs in the chapter address wealth and the dangers of appearances. Some people appear rich but have nothing, while others appear poor yet possess great treasure. This points to a deeper truth. Material wealth does not always equate to real value or inner richness. Dishonest gain is fleeting, while wealth earned through hard work grows steadily. The righteous are encouraged to pursue wealth through honest labor, trusting that such a path is more stable and fulfilling. Hope and desire also play a significant role in the chapter. Delayed hope makes the heart sick, but fulfilled desire is likened to a tree of life, something that brings renewal and deep joy. This verse speaks to the emotional and spiritual impact of waiting and fulfillment, and reflects the broader human experience of longing and satisfaction. The chapter repeatedly returns to the idea that wisdom brings life and blessing. Those who despise God's word will be destroyed, but those who fear his commandments will be rewarded. Wisdom is described as a fountain of life that steers people away from the snares of death. This metaphor reinforces the idea that wise living isn't just moral, it is vital, protective, and life-giving. Interpersonal relationships are also central to Proverbs 13. A prudent person acts with knowledge, while a fool displays his folly openly. The company one keeps is critical. Walking with the wise leads to wisdom, but associating with fools results in harm. This emphasizes the formative power of relationships and the necessity of surrounding oneself with people who embody godly wisdom. Correction and discipline are recurring themes. Those who accept rebuke are honored, while those who reject it face shame and poverty. Even parental discipline is framed in this light. Withholding correction from a child is equated with hatred, while prompt discipline is a sign of love. This challenges modern notions of permissiveness and highlights the formative power of loving correction. The chapter ends with a focus on legacy and justice. A good person leaves an inheritance not just to their children but to their grandchildren, showing that the righteous think generationally. In contrast, The wealth of the sinner is said to be stored up for the righteous, suggesting a divine reordering of resources according to justice. There is also an acknowledgement of societal brokenness. Poor people may have untapped potential, like fallow ground, but injustice prevents it from bearing fruit. The final verse brings the chapter full circle. The righteous find satisfaction and contentment, while the wicked are left hungry, physically or spiritually. In all, Proverbs 13 underscores the consistent message of wisdom literature. Choices have consequences, and the path of righteousness, though sometimes difficult, leads to life, stability, and peace. Wisdom is not simply knowledge, but right living rooted in the fear of the Lord, humility, and integrity. Proverbs chapter 14, the path of wisdom and the folly of fools. Proverbs chapter 14 is a rich tapestry of wisdom that contrasts two distinct paths in life, the way of wisdom and righteousness, and the way of folly and wickedness. Though the chapter is composed of individual proverbs, it holds together around this central theme. The choices a person makes reflect the condition of their heart and ultimately determine the course and outcome of their life. The chapter opens with an image of a wise woman building her house, while a foolish one tears it down with her own hands. This verse sets the tone for what follows. Wisdom is constructive, while foolishness is self-destructive. Throughout the chapter, Solomon emphasizes that those who fear the Lord and live uprightly are walking in wisdom, but those who are deceitful or proud show they despise God. The fear of the Lord is presented not only as a spiritual attitude but as a practical foundation for daily living, leading to confidence, protection, and life. A repeated theme in this chapter is the power of speech. Words, whether used wisely or foolishly, have significant consequences. The wise use their lips to preserve themselves and others, while the fool's prideful speech brings harm. This idea is connected to the value of truth, as seen in the praise of the faithful witness and the condemnation of lies and deceit. Honesty is not just a moral virtue, it is a matter of life and death. Another major thread is discernment, particularly in relationships and decision-making. The wise person is careful about who they spend time with, avoiding the company of fools who lack knowledge. They examine their own path and are cautious, whereas the simple believe anything and act rashly. Wisdom involves thoughtful living, considering one's steps and avoiding evil. Conversely, foolishness is often accompanied by quick temper, pride, and recklessness. The internal life of a person is also explored. Proverbs 14 acknowledges that joy and sorrow often coexist, and that each heart knows its own pain and happiness. Outward expressions can be misleading. Laughter may hide grief. This nuanced understanding of the human condition adds depth to the otherwise practical tone of the Proverbs. Even the contrast between the house of the wicked and the tent of the upright points to the idea that lasting security comes not from wealth or appearance, but from righteousness. Society and community are not neglected in this chapter. The way people treat others, especially the poor, is a direct reflection of their view of God. To oppress the poor is to insult the Creator, while mercy to the needy honors Him. Solomon also highlights how a nation is affected by the character of its people. Righteousness elevates a nation, while sin brings disgrace. In this way, wisdom is not just personal, it is communal and national. The rewards of wisdom include more than just moral superiority. They include tangible benefits. Labor brings profit, patience leads to understanding, a calm heart gives life to the body, and the wise receive favor even from rulers. In contrast, laziness, envy, impulsiveness, and evil intentions lead to poverty, destruction, and disgrace. Ultimately, Proverbs 14 teaches that there is a way that seems right to a person, but its end is death. This sobering truth calls for humility. Human reasoning, apart from divine wisdom, can be dangerously deceptive. True life is found in aligning one's thoughts, actions, and relationships with the wisdom that comes from fearing the Lord. In summary, this chapter offers a powerful reminder that every choice, whether in speech, action, or attitude, leads somewhere. It invites the reader to pursue the path of wisdom, not merely for success or approval, but because it is the path of life. In contrast, the way of folly, though it may offer short-term gratification or seem harmless, leads ultimately to ruin. Thus, Proverbs 14 stands as both a warning and a guidepost, calling each person to consider the path they are walking and to choose the way that leads to life. Proverbs chapter 15, the power of words and the path of wisdom. Proverbs chapter 15 is a rich tapestry of wisdom that emphasizes the power of words, the importance of humility, and the lasting value of righteousness. Written in the poetic style characteristic of Hebrew wisdom literature, it contrasts the behavior and consequences of the wise and the foolish, the righteous and the wicked, in both speech and action. Through these contrasts, the chapter offers practical instruction for daily living and spiritual guidance for those who seek to walk in alignment with God's will. The chapter begins with a simple but profound truth: a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. This sets the tone for much of what follows. Words have the power to either heal or harm, to diffuse tension or ignite conflict. The wise know how to use knowledge and speech responsibly, offering thoughtful, gentle responses, while fools speak impulsively, revealing their lack of understanding. This theme runs throughout the chapter, portraying the tongue as a tool that can either be a tree of life or a source of destruction. How a person speaks is presented not just as a social matter, but as a moral and spiritual one. God sees and evaluates every word and every motive, as emphasized in the verse that declares, "The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good." The chapter continues by contrasting the attitudes of the wise and the foolish toward correction. A fool resents instruction and refuses to change, while the prudent person listens and grows. This acceptance of correction is not portrayed as weakness but as a mark of maturity and strength. Those who refuse correction are described as walking a path that leads to death, not just in a physical sense, but in a spiritual and moral one. The idea that God examines even the unseen, the heart of a person, reinforces the notion that outward appearances and rituals, such as sacrifices, mean nothing to God without inner righteousness. He delights not in religious performances but in sincere prayers and upright living. Joy and contentment are also central themes. Proverbs 15 highlights the inner life by emphasizing the impact of a person's attitude. A joyful heart brings a cheerful face, while sorrow crushes the spirit. In this way, the chapter teaches that one's internal state can deeply affect their external experience of life. Even in difficult circumstances, a person with a merry heart can experience life as a continual feast. The wisdom here is not just about avoiding suffering, but about cultivating an inner life that transcends it. This idea is extended through comparisons that favor love and simplicity over wealth and strife. A dinner of herbs with love is better than a feast with hatred. A little with the fear of the Lord is better than great treasure accompanied by trouble. These sayings push back against materialism and elevate the value of peace, humility, and spiritual reverence. The text also draws attention to the practical consequences of behavior. Laziness is likened to a hedge of thorns that entangles a person's path, while diligence and uprightness create a smooth highway. Anger, pride, and greed are all shown to be destructive, not only to the individual but to their household and relationships. In contrast, patience, integrity, and a willingness to listen to advice lead to stability and blessing. The wise do not act impulsively, they consider their words and seek counsel from others. This emphasis on thoughtful speech recurs again when the proverb says, "The heart of the righteous studies how to answer," pointing to the importance of deliberation and self-control. Toward the end of the chapter, the focus returns to divine perspective. God is portrayed as near to the righteous and far from the wicked, not in a geographical sense but in terms of relationship and favor. The thoughts and motives of the wicked are offensive to God, while pure and sincere expressions bring him pleasure. A good report, a cheerful look, and the ability to receive rebuke are all signs of wisdom and life. The person who listens to correction is promised not only understanding but a place among the wise. The chapter concludes with a foundational statement: "The fear of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom, and before honor is humility." This final verse ties together the entire message. True wisdom begins with a reverent awe of God and requires humility, an openness to learn, to be corrected, and to grow. Honor and respect are not demanded but earned through a life of quiet faithfulness and submission to truth. Proverbs 15 offers timeless counsel for those seeking to live wisely. It teaches that our words, our attitudes, and our openness to correction shape not only our character but our destiny. Through these verses, readers are reminded that the path to life is not always the easiest, but it is marked by humility, righteousness, and a deep reverence for God. Proverbs chapter 16, the sovereignty of God and the way of wisdom. Proverbs chapter 16 presents a profound meditation on the tension between human intention and divine sovereignty. It begins by acknowledging the role of human agency, the plans, thoughts, and efforts that originate within a person's heart. Yet even in these, it emphasizes that the final word, the outcome, and even the proper response come from the Lord. While individuals often believe their actions are justified, it is God who discerns the true motivations behind them. This theme, repeated throughout the chapter, reminds readers that human judgment is limited and often biased, whereas God sees with perfect clarity. A major emphasis in this chapter is the call to commit one's actions to the Lord. When people trust God with their work and motives, He aligns their thoughts and brings stability to their intentions. This is a call not only to faith but to surrender, trusting that God's guidance ultimately leads to the right path. The proverb that states, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps," highlights this balance between planning and divine direction. Even the wicked, the chapter claims, serve a purpose within God's larger design, though it is a sobering thought that their destiny is judgment. Pride is another recurring theme in Proverbs 16. The text warns that a proud heart is detestable to God and inevitably leads to downfall. This is captured in one of the Bible's most well-known verses, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." Rather than elevating oneself, it is better to walk humbly, even among the lowly, than to share in the spoils of the arrogant. Humility, coupled with righteousness, is of far greater worth than any worldly gain attained unjustly. This is further reinforced with the claim that wisdom and understanding are better than gold or silver, placing moral and spiritual riches above material wealth. The chapter also speaks to those in leadership, particularly kings and rulers, emphasizing that their authority must be rooted in justice and righteousness. A ruler's words carry weight, and their decisions impact many lives, thus, their judgment should reflect God's values. Rulers are exhorted to love truth and detest wickedness, for a throne is not secured by power alone but by moral integrity. Just leadership brings peace and life, and a wise person knows how to respond to authority with discretion and insight. Speech, a central theme in the book of Proverbs, receives particular attention here. Words are described as powerful tools, capable of healing or harming. Wise and gracious speech enhances learning and builds up others, while deceitful or harmful words cause division, stir strife, and lead others into destruction. The imagery used, such as pleasant words being like honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones, underscores the life-giving power of good communication. In contrast, the words of the wicked are like a burning fire, spreading damage and conflict. The chapter also delves into the nature of true strength. It challenges the conventional idea that might and conquest define greatness, proposing instead that self-control, patience, and a calm spirit are more admirable. To rule over one's own emotions and reactions is better than taking a city by force. In this light, internal mastery is more honorable than external success. Proverbs 16 concludes with a reminder that even seemingly random outcomes are under God's control. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. What may appear as chance is ultimately governed by divine will. This closing verse brings the reader back to the central message of the chapter. While humans plan, act, and speak, it is God who governs the outcomes. The call, then, is to live wisely, with humility, integrity, trust in God, and careful, gracious speech, knowing that the Lord weighs all things and directs the path of those who fear Him. Proverbs chapter 17, the way of wisdom in daily life. Proverbs 17 is a rich tapestry of wisdom sayings that touch on the practical and moral dimensions of life. The overarching message of the chapter centers on the value of wisdom, the importance of inner character, and the enduring truth that God ultimately judges the heart. Though each verse often stands alone as a proverb, together they offer a cohesive vision of what it means to live rightly before both God and others. The chapter opens with a contrast between external abundance and internal peace. It teaches that a simple life filled with peace is far better than a house full of feasting marred by conflict. This sentiment reflects a recurring theme throughout Proverbs. Inner tranquility and moral integrity are of greater worth than material wealth. True joy and contentment come not from outward prosperity but from the condition of one's heart and relationships. This thought is reinforced by the second verse, which speaks to the value of wisdom and character over position or family status. A servant who is wise may be exalted over a disgraceful son, reminding the reader that honor comes through virtue, not simply by birthright. As the chapter progresses, the focus turns toward the moral quality of the heart. Just as silver and gold are tested and purified by fire, so the Lord tests the hearts of individuals. Human judgment often stops at appearances, but God sees deeper. He weighs motives, desires, and intentions. This truth serves as both a warning and a comfort. Those who live with integrity may go unnoticed by the world, but they are fully seen and valued by God. Conversely, those who present a false image of righteousness will eventually be exposed. The writer continues with warnings about the corrupting power of speech and the company one keeps. Those who are evil are drawn to lies and slander, and such speech destroys relationships and communities. Moreover, mocking the poor or taking pleasure in another's calamity shows a heart far from God, for it insults the Creator himself and brings judgment upon the one who does it. Proverbs 17 does not shy away from emphasizing that actions have consequences, especially when those actions violate justice and compassion. Family is portrayed as both a source of pride and sorrow. Grandchildren are described as a crown to the elderly, and fathers are the glory of their children, highlighting the joy that comes from generational blessing. Yet, the chapter also notes the pain caused by foolish offspring. A son who mocks wisdom brings deep grief to his parents, showing that personal decisions ripple outward into the lives of others. The chapter further highlights the importance of relationships built on love, forgiveness, and loyalty. Covering over an offense, choosing forgiveness rather than gossip, is praised as a sign of love, whereas bringing up past wrongs destroys friendships. This shows the high value placed on reconciliation and discretion. Rebuke, though often unpleasant, is also seen as a tool of growth. A wise person benefits greatly from a single correction, while a fool remains unchanged even after many harsh consequences. This contrast drives home the idea that wisdom is not merely knowledge, but a heart ready to learn and grow. Proverbs 17 also offers insight into emotional and spiritual health. A joyful heart is compared to medicine, suggesting that a positive and thankful spirit has healing power, while a broken spirit leads to despair and even physical decline. The writer makes a profound connection between one's emotional state and overall well-being, reminding the reader that spiritual health cannot be separated from daily life. Throughout the chapter, the dangers of foolishness, pride, and injustice are clearly laid out. Whether it's rash financial decisions, accepting bribes, or twisting justice, each act of folly is shown to have destructive consequences. Meanwhile, the wise person is marked by calmness, restraint, and humility. In fact, the final verses point out that even a fool seems wise when he remains silent, underscoring the power of self-control and the importance of listening more than speaking. Ultimately, Proverbs 17 weaves together themes of wisdom, justice, family, speech, and the inner life to present a clear vision of godly living. It challenges the reader to examine not just their actions, but their motives, and to value peace, righteousness, and love above wealth or status. Above all, it reminds us that while people look at appearances, God examines the heart, and it is there that true wisdom begins. Proverbs chapter 18, the power of words and the wisdom of trusting in God. Proverbs 18 offers a profound exploration of wisdom, communication, character, and the role of divine protection in human life. It weaves together individual sayings that, while seemingly disconnected on the surface, form a coherent picture of how a wise person lives in relationship to others, to themselves, and to God. The chapter warns against the dangers of isolation, the misuse of speech, and the false security found in wealth, while elevating humility, understanding, and reliance on the Lord. The chapter begins with a strong warning against self-imposed isolation. A person who isolates themselves does so not out of wisdom, but to fulfill selfish desires, rejecting wise counsel and sound judgment. This rebellious attitude sets the tone for many of the themes that follow. Immediately, the writer contrasts this behavior with the fool who does not seek understanding but simply wants to express his own opinions. This kind of person is not open to correction or dialogue, which is portrayed as a fundamental flaw. Fools, throughout Proverbs 18, are shown to be reckless with their words, initiating conflicts and even bringing destruction upon themselves. Their speech invites strife and violence, becoming a snare for their own souls. Another dominant theme in the chapter is the power of words. The tongue is not neutral, it holds the potential for great harm or great blessing. A wise person's words are described as deep waters, rich, profound, and life-giving, while the fool's words are impulsive and dangerous. Gossip, in particular, is identified as harmful. Though it may seem pleasant or enticing, tasty trifles, it embeds itself deeply, influencing thoughts and emotions in unseen but significant ways. The text also teaches that words shape one's destiny. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, indicating that speech can either build up or destroy, both oneself and others. This is reinforced by the idea that a person's life will be filled or emptied by the fruit of their own lips. The chapter further underscores the need for humility and careful judgment. Those who speak before hearing all sides are called foolish and shameful. The first to speak may sound right, but full understanding only comes when all perspectives are heard. This is a crucial principle for anyone seeking justice or wisdom. The value of patience, careful listening, and fairness is lifted above rash assumptions or bias. Similarly, humility is portrayed as a precursor to honor, whereas pride leads to destruction. This theme aligns with a recurring biblical message: God exalts the humble but brings low the proud. One of the most famous verses in Proverbs 18 stands out as a declaration of divine refuge. The name of the Lord is a strong tower, the righteous run to it and are safe. This verse presents God's name, representing His character and power, as a place of protection. It is a striking contrast to the very next verse, which critiques the rich who view their wealth as a high wall. While the righteous find security in God, the rich deceive themselves by trusting in material wealth. The juxtaposition highlights the difference between true safety and a false sense of invincibility. Interpersonal relationships are another key focus. The writer warns that an offended brother is harder to win back than a fortified city, showing the difficulty of reconciliation once trust is broken. This echoes the earlier theme of speech, as words often play a role in causing such offenses. There is also commentary on how people treat one another based on wealth. The poor are depicted as speaking with humility, while the rich often answer harshly, possibly out of pride or detachment from the struggles of others. The chapter closes with reflections on friendship and marriage. Finding a spouse is described as finding a good thing and receiving favor from the Lord, suggesting that marriage is both a blessing and a sign of divine grace. In friendship, the proverb teaches that a person must be friendly in order to have friends, yet it ends with a deeper truth: there is a kind of friend who sticks closer than a brother. This hints at the profound value of loyal companionship, possibly even foreshadowing the kind of relationship God desires with His people. Altogether, Proverbs 18 is a guide to living wisely and righteously in a complex world. It calls for thoughtful speech, humility, and a life anchored in the fear and trust of God. Its teachings are as relevant today as they were in ancient times, offering timeless counsel for anyone seeking to navigate life with integrity and wisdom. Proverbs chapter 19, Wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord. Proverbs chapter 19 presents a rich tapestry of wisdom that touches on themes of integrity, discipline, relationships, and the central role of reverence for God. As with many chapters in the book of Proverbs, it offers practical guidance through short, vivid sayings that contrast the outcomes of wisdom and foolishness. At its core, this chapter underscores the truth that living in the fear of the Lord leads to a meaningful, secure, and honorable life. The chapter begins by declaring that a poor person who walks in integrity is better than someone who speaks perversely and is a fool. This sets the tone for a recurring theme: character matters more than wealth or status. Throughout the chapter, those who act with honesty, humility, and self-control are praised, while those who lie, scheme, or act rashly are warned of inevitable consequences. Foolishness is not just a lack of intelligence, it is a moral failing that leads people away from God's path and into personal ruin. The writer points out that people often bring hardship upon themselves through poor decisions, then irrationally blame God for the consequences, reflecting a twisted view of justice and responsibility. A realistic yet sobering view of human relationships emerges in verses that describe how wealth attracts friends, while poverty leads to abandonment, even by one's own family. These proverbs do not celebrate this reality, but rather expose the shallowness of human favoritism. In contrast, the person who seeks wisdom and understanding is said to love their own soul, highlighting that inner growth is more beneficial and enduring than external approval. Throughout the chapter, honesty and truthfulness are emphasized. False witnesses and liars are assured of judgment. The text makes it clear that deception and injustice will not go unpunished, reinforcing the biblical theme that God is a God of truth who defends the innocent and opposes the wicked. In this light, wisdom includes aligning oneself with God's values, choosing truth over falsehood, mercy over cruelty, and discipline over indulgence. Family dynamics are also addressed. A foolish child brings ruin to a father, and a quarrelsome wife is likened to a constant dripping, both images expressing the deep emotional and spiritual impact of strained relationships. Yet, while houses and wealth can be inherited, a prudent wife is a gift from the Lord. This acknowledges that some of life's most meaningful blessings, such as a wise and supportive partner, come not from human effort alone, but from divine providence. Laziness is criticized as a self-destructive habit. The lazy person is depicted as too slothful to even feed himself, suggesting an absurd level of inactivity. In contrast, diligence and obedience to God's commands are shown to preserve life. Moreover, generosity is praised with a remarkable insight. Giving to the poor is seen as lending to the Lord, and God Himself will repay. This affirms that acts of compassion are not forgotten, but are honored by God. Parenting and discipline are also key topics. The text urges parents to correct their children while there is still hope, indicating that discipline is not cruelty, but a form of love that seeks the child's long-term good. Similarly, those who refuse correction or reject instruction are warned that they will stray from wisdom and face serious consequences. The path to maturity involves listening, learning, and being willing to change. One of the most profound statements in the chapter comes in verse 21, "There are many plans in a man's heart, nevertheless the Lord's counsel, that will stand." This reminds readers that human ambition and strategy are limited, and that God's purposes ultimately prevail. It calls for humility and a deep trust in God's sovereignty. The chapter culminates in a powerful promise: the fear of the Lord leads to life, and he who has it will abide in satisfaction. He will not be visited with evil. This verse captures the heart of the entire chapter. To fear the Lord means to live in reverence, awe, and submission to Him. It is not a fear of terror, but of deep respect and moral seriousness. Those who live this way find not only life, but lasting contentment and security. In contrast, those who mock wisdom, reject justice, and persist in folly are warned of coming judgment. Proverbs 19, then, is not merely a collection of moral sayings, it is a profound reflection on the kind of life that aligns with God's will. It calls readers to pursue wisdom, practice integrity, love discipline, and live in the fear of the Lord. Such a life may not always bring material wealth or worldly success, but it leads to something far greater: peace with God, stability in character, and the satisfaction of a life well lived. Proverbs chapter 20, the conduct of the wise and the foolish. Proverbs chapter 20 is a collection of wise sayings that offer insight into human behavior, morality, and divine truth. It addresses a variety of topics: self-control, honesty, diligence, leadership, and trust in God, all pointing toward a life of wisdom rooted in righteousness. The chapter functions as a mirror of human nature and a moral guide, reminding readers that true wisdom is not found in pride or deceit but in integrity, humility, and reverence for God's direction. The chapter begins with a warning about the dangers of alcohol. Wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, the text declares, suggesting that those who are led astray by intoxicating substances lose their sense of judgment and respectability. This opening sets the tone for the entire passage by contrasting wisdom and folly. Wisdom practices restraint, while folly gives in to impulse. Similarly, the next verse teaches reverence for authority. Just as the roar of a lion signals danger, the wrath of a king, or any figure of power, should not be provoked lightly. The wise understand that peace, respect, and prudence preserve life, whereas reckless defiance invites ruin. Throughout the chapter, self-control is depicted as a hallmark of honor. It is honorable for a man to stop striving, since any fool can start a quarrel, Proverbs 20 verse 3 states. True strength is found not in the ability to win an argument but in the wisdom to avoid unnecessary conflict. Likewise, laziness and procrastination are condemned as destructive habits. The man who refuses to plow because of winter will beg during harvest and have nothing. The message is clear: diligence and foresight bring provision, while excuses lead to poverty. Wisdom requires effort and discipline, both in work and in moral living. The text also explores the theme of integrity. Many claim to be good, but who can find a faithful man? The proverb points out that genuine faithfulness is rare, for people often overestimate their virtue. Yet, the righteous man walks in his integrity, his children are blessed after him. Integrity, therefore, is not only a personal virtue but a legacy. It blesses future generations. The same principle applies to leadership. A just ruler scatters all evil with his eyes, symbolizing the purging of corruption through discernment and fairness. Leaders who act with mercy and truth preserve their authority, while deceitful ones undermine their own foundations. Human imperfection is another recurring theme. Who can say, "I have made my heart clean, I am pure from my sin"? The rhetorical question underscores humanity's universal need for God's grace. No one is entirely righteous or self-purified. Only through divine mercy can a person be truly cleansed. This humility before God connects with another proverb in the chapter: "A man's steps are of the Lord, how then can a man understand his own way?" It reminds readers that life is not fully under human control. God guides the paths of men, and wisdom begins with recognizing His sovereignty. The chapter also warns against dishonesty in daily dealings. The repetition of the phrase "diverse weights and measures are an abomination to the Lord" condemns economic deceit, a common ancient practice where merchants used false scales to cheat buyers. God detests dishonesty, not only in business but in all areas of life. Even children, the proverb says, are known by their deeds. What one does reveals true character. Wisdom, therefore, is observable. It manifests through action, not words. Similarly, the lips of knowledge are described as more valuable than gold or rubies, emphasizing that moral and spiritual truth surpasses material wealth in worth. Another strong thread in this chapter is the danger of deceit and impulsiveness. Bread gained through deceit may taste sweet initially, but it turns to gravel in the mouth. The image conveys the temporary pleasure of wrongdoing, followed by inevitable regret. Proverbs warns against rash vows as well. Making promises to God or others without careful thought can become a trap. Wisdom calls for restraint and reflection before making commitments. Along these lines, the text discourages revenge. Do not say, "I will recompense evil." Wait for the Lord, and He will save you. True justice belongs to God, and trusting in His timing is an act of faith and patience. Interpersonal relationships are also addressed. The talebearer, or gossip, is condemned for spreading secrets, and the listener is cautioned not to associate with such people. Speech has power. It can build up or destroy reputations and relationships. Proverbs 20 emphasizes the need for discretion, truthfulness, and self-control in communication. Similarly, respect for parents is elevated to a moral duty. Whoever curses his father or his mother, his lamp will be put out in deep darkness. To dishonor one's parents is to reject wisdom itself, and the result is spiritual and moral darkness. As the chapter concludes, it reflects on maturity, leadership, and discipline. Youth is praised for its strength, while old age is honored for its wisdom. Both are gifts from God, suited to different stages of life. The final verse draws a sobering yet hopeful picture. Blows that hurt cleanse away evil, as dew stripes the inner depths of the heart. Pain, whether physical or moral, can serve as correction. Discipline purifies the heart, teaching lessons that comfort and ease often cannot. In essence, Proverbs chapter 20 paints a portrait of the wise person as one who lives with restraint, integrity, humility, and dependence on God. It teaches that wisdom is not found in quick riches, deceit, or pride, but in honesty, diligence, and faith. It calls for self-examination, reminding readers that the human spirit is the lamp of the Lord, illuminating the innermost thoughts and motives of the heart. The chapter's timeless counsel urges all who read it to live transparently before God, to treat others justly, and to trust divine providence in every step. In doing so, one finds not only personal peace but the favor and stability that come from walking in harmony with God's wisdom. Proverbs chapter 21, The Lord weighs the heart. Proverbs chapter 21 is a profound reflection on the sovereignty of God, the nature of true righteousness, and the contrast between wisdom and wickedness in daily life. It begins by reminding the reader that even the mightiest rulers are subject to God's will. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, he turns it wherever he wishes. This opening truth sets the tone for the entire chapter. Human power, wisdom, and plans ultimately bend under divine authority. While people may think their ways are right, God looks beyond appearances and weighs the heart, revealing that moral worth is not measured by human standards but by sincerity and integrity before Him. The emphasis here is on inner righteousness over outward show, as God delights more in righteousness and justice than in sacrifice. This teaching undermines superficial religion and calls for a life genuinely aligned with God's character. The chapter continues to contrast the ways of the righteous and the wicked. A proud heart and haughty eyes are condemned as sin, showing that even subtle attitudes of arrogance corrupt one's actions. Diligence is praised as the path to prosperity, while haste and impulsiveness lead to poverty. Honest labor and patience bring stability, but wealth gained through deceit is fleeting, leading to ruin and death. The wicked, through their own violence and injustice, set traps for themselves. In contrast, the pure and upright are guided by integrity, their work is steady and pleasing in God's sight. Proverbs 21 also addresses the realities of human relationships and domestic peace. It declares that it is better to live alone on a rooftop or even in the wilderness than to share a home with a contentious and angry spouse. This practical wisdom underscores the value of peace over material comfort. Harmony in relationships, the text suggests, is worth more than luxury. The wicked, by contrast, find no joy except in evil, and they lack compassion even toward their neighbors. God, however, sees their actions and judges with justice, ensuring that wickedness never goes unnoticed or unpunished. The chapter highlights compassion as a mark of true righteousness. Those who ignore the cry of the poor will themselves be ignored in their time of need. This principle of divine reciprocity reveals God's concern for justice and mercy. A secret gift, given wisely, can calm anger, implying that discretion and kindness can ease tension. For the righteous, doing justice is a source of joy, while for the wicked, justice brings destruction. Those who turn away from understanding and wisdom end up among the spiritually dead, having chosen ignorance over truth. Love of pleasure and indulgence in luxury lead to poverty, for such desires weaken discipline and cloud judgment. The Proverbs continue to stress the rewards of righteousness and the consequences of folly. The wise store up precious treasure and oil, symbols of prudence and foresight, while the foolish waste their resources. Those who pursue righteousness and mercy find not only life but also honor, showing that moral virtue yields enduring blessings. The power of wisdom is celebrated as greater than physical strength. The wise can conquer what the mighty cannot by understanding and strategy. Speech is another key theme. Those who guard their mouths and tongues preserve their lives, while the arrogant and scoffing invite trouble through prideful words. Laziness is condemned as self-destructive, for the lazy are consumed by desire but unwilling to labor for their needs. In contrast, the righteous are generous, giving freely without fear of lack. The chapter denounces hypocritical religion. Sacrifices offered by the wicked are an abomination, especially when done with corrupt motives. True worship cannot coexist with deceitful hearts. Ultimately, false witnesses will perish, but those who speak truth will endure. The wicked harden their faces in defiance, but the upright walk with stability and confidence. The chapter closes by reaffirming God's supreme authority. There is no wisdom, no understanding, and no counsel against the Lord. Human schemes, no matter how clever or powerful, cannot prevail against divine will. Preparation and effort, symbolized by a horse readied for battle, are wise and necessary, but victory and deliverance belong to the Lord alone. In this final reminder, the proverb balances human responsibility with divine sovereignty. Overall, Proverbs 21 paints a vivid picture of a moral universe governed by a just and all-knowing God. It teaches that righteousness, humility, and diligence bring life and honor, while pride, deceit, and laziness lead to ruin. True wisdom is rooted not in human understanding but in reverence for God's authority. The chapter calls believers to examine their motives, practice integrity, seek justice, and trust that all outcomes rest in the hands of the Lord, who alone weighs the heart and directs the course of human life. Proverbs chapter 22, the value of wisdom, integrity, and godly living. Proverbs 22 is an instructive chapter that weaves together timeless lessons on integrity, humility, discipline, justice, and wisdom. It opens with the statement that a good name is to be chosen over great riches. This sets the tone for the entire chapter, establishing that character and reputation are far more valuable than material success. Wealth is temporary, but a person's integrity and the favor that comes from righteous living are enduring treasures that cannot be bought with silver or gold. The next verse reminds us that both the rich and the poor share a common Creator. In this simple but powerful truth, the writer levels the social and economic playing field, showing that all people are equal before God. Wealth does not elevate a person in divine terms, nor does poverty diminish one's worth. From this equality flows a moral responsibility. Those with power or resources must not exploit others, for the Lord is the maker and defender of all. Wisdom, in this chapter, is portrayed as foresight and self-discipline. The prudent person sees danger ahead and takes refuge, while the simple-minded walk blindly into harm. The wise live with awareness and self-control, guided by humility and the fear of the Lord, qualities that, according to verse 4, lead to true riches, honor, and life. This principle contrasts worldly ambition with godly humility, suggesting that reverence for God and a modest heart bring blessings that money and pride cannot. The text then turns to the realities of moral and social conduct. The perverse find their paths filled with thorns and snares, but those who guard their souls stay far from such traps. Among the most well-known teachings in this chapter is the counsel to train up a child in the way he should go, a proverb that highlights the lifelong impact of early moral and spiritual guidance. The formation of character begins in youth, and instruction grounded in godly principles provides direction that endures into adulthood. Solomon continues by observing the dynamics of wealth and power. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. This is a practical warning about debt and dependence, teaching that financial prudence safeguards freedom. Likewise, the one who sows iniquity will inevitably reap sorrow, underscoring the moral law of cause and effect. What we plant in life, whether good or evil, will return to us in kind. In contrast, generosity brings blessing. Those who share their bread with the poor demonstrate compassion that God rewards. Strife and conflict often stem from arrogance and mockery. So the proverb advises casting out the scoffer to restore peace. Purity of heart and gracious speech, on the other hand, win favor even from kings. The Lord himself preserves truth and knowledge, while he frustrates the words of the faithless. The lazy person, inventing excuses to avoid work, imagines danger where there is none, claiming, for example, that a lion lurks outside. Through such vivid imagery, the writer exposes the foolishness of sloth. Moral decay also appears in the form of temptation. The mouth of an immoral woman is described as a deep pit, an image of the ruin that sexual immorality brings. Those who reject God's ways often fall into such traps. The chapter stresses the necessity of discipline, especially in children, for foolishness resides naturally in the human heart but can be corrected through loving guidance. Finally, oppression of the poor for profit or flattery of the rich for gain leads only to poverty and divine judgment, reminding readers that God's justice is impartial and sure. The latter part of the chapter transitions into a section called The Sayings of the Wise. Here, the reader is urged to listen attentively and internalize wisdom, allowing these teachings to shape both thought and speech. The purpose of this instruction is not mere knowledge but deeper trust in the Lord. Wisdom, when truly absorbed, brings certainty and the ability to speak truth with confidence and integrity. Practical warnings follow against robbing the poor, associating with angry people, or recklessly guaranteeing another's debts. Each of these admonitions protects one's spiritual and practical well-being. To rob or exploit the vulnerable is to invite divine retribution, for God himself pleads the cause of the afflicted. Keeping company with hot-tempered individuals leads only to learning their destructive ways. Similarly, standing surety for another person's debt may result in personal loss. Wisdom teaches careful stewardship. The chapter concludes with two striking images of integrity and excellence. The first warns against removing the ancient landmark set by one's ancestors, a metaphor for respecting moral and social boundaries established by previous generations. The second commends diligence. A skilled and dedicated worker will stand before kings, not obscure men. This final verse encapsulates the reward of consistent effort and excellence. Those who pursue their work faithfully will gain honor and recognition. In summary, Proverbs 22 paints a portrait of the wise and righteous life. It calls for integrity over wealth, humility over pride, generosity over greed, and discipline over negligence. It upholds justice for the poor, warns against foolish alliances, and praises the diligence that leads to success. At its heart, this chapter teaches that true wisdom begins and ends with reverence for the Lord. Those who live by these principles gain not only material stability and respect but also the enduring blessing of divine favor. Proverbs chapter 23, The Rewards of Wisdom and the Dangers of Folly. Proverbs chapter 23 is a profound and practical collection of teachings centered on wisdom, self-control, humility, and the proper ordering of one's heart before God. Written in the form of a father's loving instruction to his son, it captures many of the enduring themes of biblical wisdom literature: the fleeting nature of wealth, the dangers of indulgence, the value of discipline, and the blessings of living a righteous life grounded in the fear of the Lord. The chapter moves fluidly between warnings against external temptations and encouragements to cultivate inward wisdom, integrity, and reverence. The chapter begins by urging caution and restraint when dining with those in positions of power. The father warns his son to consider carefully what is before you and to exercise self-control, even to the point of metaphorically putting a knife to your throat if given to appetite. The delicacies of the powerful may seem desirable, but they often come with hidden motives and moral compromise. This opening passage teaches that self-discipline and discernment are vital in social and political contexts, for appearances can deceive, and indulgence can entrap. The theme continues as the writer warns against working excessively in pursuit of wealth. Riches are fleeting and unreliable, they fly away like an eagle toward heaven. The wise person recognizes that material gain is temporary and should not be the ultimate aim of life. The writer then turns his attention to false generosity, cautioning against dining with a miser or someone whose heart is not truly hospitable. Such a person may offer food and drink outwardly but does so with insincerity. Accepting such an offer brings regret rather than blessing, for the motives behind it are selfish. This lesson reinforces the importance of sincerity in relationships and the need to discern character rather than outward appearance. Likewise, the father advises his son not to speak in the hearing of fools, for they will only despise wisdom. True understanding requires humility and a receptive heart. Without it, even wise words fall on deaf ears. A strong moral warning follows regarding justice and compassion. The instruction not to remove the ancient landmark serves both as a literal command against stealing land and as a metaphor for respecting the moral and social boundaries established by God. Those who exploit the vulnerable, such as orphans or the poor, are reminded that their Redeemer is mighty and will defend them. This underscores the moral foundation of wisdom, righteousness, fairness, and care for others are essential to a life that honors God. The father next stresses the importance of discipline in raising children. Though correction may seem harsh, it is portrayed as an act of love and salvation. Proper discipline, symbolized by the rod, is meant to steer the child away from destruction and spiritual death. This teaching reflects the biblical view that love involves guidance and correction, not indulgence or neglect. The father's joy is tied to his child's wisdom. My heart will rejoice, indeed, I myself. When the son speaks and acts rightly, it brings delight to his parents, reinforcing the generational blessing of moral integrity. The chapter continues by warning against envy of sinners. Instead of coveting their apparent success, one should remain zealous for the fear of the Lord. There is hope and a future for those who walk in wisdom and righteousness, but the pursuits of the wicked lead only to emptiness. Wisdom requires patience and faith, trusting that God's justice and reward are certain, even if not immediate. The father then encourages his son to avoid companions who are drunkards or gluttons, for such lifestyles lead to poverty and shame. Moderation and self-control are again highlighted as virtues that preserve dignity and stability. A particularly tender section follows, urging the son to listen to his father and not despise his mother when she is old. The counsel to buy the truth and do not sell it captures one of the deepest themes of the chapter. Truth, wisdom, and understanding are priceless treasures worth any sacrifice. The pursuit of truth brings joy to parents and honor to the family. A wise and righteous child becomes a source of gladness for both father and mother, illustrating how personal virtue blesses not only the individual but also the community and home. The father then pleads, "My son, give me your heart," calling for an inner commitment to wisdom, not mere outward obedience. He warns against the seductions of a harlot and an adulterous woman, describing her as a deep pit and a narrow well. Such imagery conveys the destructive, entrapping nature of sexual immorality. It leads men to ruin, dishonor, and unfaithfulness, illustrating how the misuse of desire can undermine both personal integrity and spiritual well-being. The final section of the chapter offers a vivid and sobering portrayal of drunkenness. Through a series of rhetorical questions, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? The writer depicts the misery and degradation that follow a life of intoxication. Wine appears alluring, sparkling in the cup, but it ultimately bites like a serpent and stings like a viper. The imagery grows increasingly chaotic, blurred vision, perverse speech, and the loss of self-awareness. The drunkard becomes like one tossed in a storm, senseless to pain yet enslaved to his addiction, saying, "When shall I awake, that I may seek another drink?" The passage serves as a powerful warning about the deceptive pleasures that promise escape but bring only bondage and destruction. Throughout Proverbs 23, the recurring call is to live with wisdom, temperance, and integrity, to govern one's heart and appetites rather than being ruled by them. The father's instruction reveals that wisdom is not only intellectual but moral and spiritual. It involves aligning one's desires with righteousness and fearing the Lord. The pursuit of wealth, pleasure, and indulgence may seem fulfilling, but they are transient and ultimately empty. True life, joy, and stability come from truth, discipline, humility, and reverence for God. This chapter, therefore, stands as a timeless guide for anyone seeking to live wisely in a world filled with temptations and deceit, reminding the reader that the heart anchored in God's wisdom will not be cut off from hope or reward. Proverbs chapter 24, Lessons in Wisdom and Righteous Living. Proverbs chapter 24 offers a rich collection of moral and practical lessons that guide believers toward wise and righteous living. It speaks to the importance of integrity, self-control, humility, justice, and diligence, contrasting the fleeting success of the wicked with the enduring stability of those who follow God's wisdom. The chapter opens by warning against envy of evil people. Though they may appear prosperous or powerful, their hearts are consumed with violence and deceit. The message is clear: the apparent success of the wicked is temporary, and aligning oneself with them leads only to ruin. Instead of pursuing what the ungodly have, one should seek wisdom, for through wisdom a house is built and established. This idea of building with wisdom suggests that a meaningful and lasting life is founded not on wealth or influence but on understanding, knowledge, and sound judgment. The text continues by emphasizing that true strength is found in wisdom and counsel. A wise person is strong not because of physical power but because wisdom equips them to face life's battles with discernment. This strength grows through collaboration and the seeking of advice, for in a multitude of counselors there is safety. By contrast, the fool finds wisdom unattainable, unable to even speak wisely in public settings where discernment is required. The chapter describes the schemer, one who plots evil, as someone whose very thoughts are sinful. It is not only wicked actions but also the devising of foolishness that offends God, showing that sin begins in the heart long before it appears in behavior. Another important lesson in this chapter concerns perseverance and moral courage. If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small, Proverbs declares, teaching that the true test of character comes in times of hardship. Strength is revealed not in comfort but in crisis. The call to help those who are drawn toward death shows that righteousness involves responsibility toward others. Believers are not to turn a blind eye to those in danger or distress, because God, who weighs the heart, knows when we ignore opportunities to do good. This underscores that compassion and justice are inseparable from true wisdom. The comparison of wisdom to honey reminds readers that wisdom is not only valuable but also delightful and life-giving. Just as honey nourishes the body, wisdom nourishes the soul, offering hope and a secure future to those who seek it. This section transitions into a warning for the wicked not to attack or plot against the righteous, because although the righteous may fall repeatedly, they will rise again. God sustains those who are upright, while the wicked, lacking a firm foundation, ultimately fall to calamity. This resilience of the righteous highlights the power of faith and perseverance in the face of adversity. The text also instructs readers not to rejoice when an enemy falls. Gloating over someone's misfortune, even if they are an enemy, displeases the Lord. God values mercy and humility, and those who take pleasure in others' suffering reveal a heart lacking compassion. Similarly, the passage warns against fretting over evildoers or envying their success. The apparent prosperity of the wicked is temporary, their lamp will be extinguished, and their future will vanish. The wise person, instead of envying others, maintains reverence for both the Lord and the governing authorities, recognizing that rebellion and instability lead to destruction. Justice and fairness form another central theme in Proverbs 24. Showing partiality in judgment or calling the wicked righteous perverts justice and brings condemnation, not only from God but also from society. In contrast, those who rebuke evil will be honored and blessed. Honesty and integrity in speech are praised as well, with the proverb stating that a right answer is like a kiss on the lips, a sign of sincerity and respect. This teaches that truthful communication builds trust and harmony. Practical wisdom is also emphasized in the exhortation to prepare one's work in the field before building a house. This encourages planning, responsibility, and foresight, qualities essential for stability and success. Rash or impulsive decisions lead to failure, while orderly diligence creates a firm foundation for life. The chapter also discourages revenge, warning against bearing false witness or seeking to do to him just as he has done to me. Vengeance belongs to God, not to human hands. Responding to wrongdoing with retaliation only perpetuates sin and prevents healing. The chapter closes with a vivid illustration of the lazy man's field, overgrown with thorns and broken walls. The wise observer learns from this image that neglect and idleness gradually destroy both property and character. A little laziness, repeated day after day, leads to poverty and ruin as swiftly as a thief or an armed robber. This image serves as a final reminder that diligence and discipline are essential for a prosperous and meaningful life. In its entirety, Proverbs 24 portrays wisdom as the foundation of strength, justice, compassion, and productivity. It teaches that life built on godly understanding endures adversity and flourishes, while a life of foolishness, envy, or laziness collapses. The chapter calls believers to live with moral integrity, to act justly toward others, to remain humble before God, and to work diligently in all things. In doing so, they not only secure their own well-being but also reflect the wisdom and righteousness of God in the world. Proverbs chapter 25, Wisdom in Leadership, Relationships, and Self-Control. Proverbs chapter 25 marks a new section in the book, a collection of Solomon's wise sayings that were later copied and preserved by the men of King Hezekiah of Judah. This connection across generations highlights the timelessness of godly wisdom, truth that remains valuable regardless of era or circumstance. The chapter weaves together insights about leadership, humility, speech, self-control, and human relationships, presenting a mosaic of guidance for living wisely in community and before God. The opening verses set the tone by contrasting the glory of God and that of kings. It is said that God's glory lies in concealing matters, while kings find their honor in searching them out. This shows that divine wisdom is far beyond human comprehension. God hides certain truths in mystery, while leaders are called to uncover and understand the things entrusted to them, seeking justice and discernment. The following verse likens the heart of kings to the vastness of the heavens and the depths of the earth, expressing that leadership and human motives are often complex and not easily understood. A wise ruler, therefore, must rule with careful thought and moral clarity. The next few verses turn attention to purity and justice in leadership. Just as a silversmith removes dross to purify silver, a king must remove the wicked from his presence to establish his throne in righteousness. Corruption weakens authority, but integrity strengthens it. This is followed by an appeal to humility before those in power. One should not exalt oneself or seek prominence in the presence of a king. Instead, it is better to wait and be invited upward than to face the embarrassment of being lowered. This teaching mirrors the humility that Jesus later emphasized, warning against pride and self-promotion. Solomon then turns to the theme of conflict and discretion. One should not be quick to rush into disputes or public accusations. It is wiser to reason privately with a neighbor and to avoid spreading secrets or gossip. Acting hastily or betraying confidences brings shame and ruins reputations. The wise person handles disagreements with calmness, fairness, and self-restraint. Closely related to this is the value of well-chosen words. A word spoken at the right time and in the right spirit is compared to apples of gold in settings of silver, beautiful, precious, and enduring. In the same way, wise correction given to someone who listens is as valuable as fine jewelry, enriching both the giver and the receiver. Faithfulness and sincerity are next commended. A dependable messenger is like the cooling snow during harvest, refreshing and life-giving to those who depend on him. In contrast, someone who boasts of generosity but never follows through is like clouds without rain, full of promise but yielding nothing. The proverb about patience teaches that gentle persistence can persuade even a ruler and that soft speech can achieve what harshness cannot. True strength lies not in force but in self-control and forbearance. The chapter continues with practical lessons about moderation and social boundaries. Honey, though sweet and good, can make one sick if eaten in excess. In the same way, one should not visit a neighbor too often, lest familiarity breed annoyance. Moderation and sensitivity preserve peace in relationships. Solomon also warns against false witness, comparing deceitful testimony to dangerous weapons. Trusting an unreliable person in times of need is equally damaging, like depending on a broken tooth or a dislocated foot. Moreover, attempting to cheer a sorrowful person with light-hearted songs is as inappropriate as taking away a coat in winter, wisdom includes knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. The chapter reaches a moral peak in its teaching about kindness toward enemies. If your enemy is hungry or thirsty, you should feed and refresh him. By showing kindness, one may awaken his conscience and bring shame to his hostility, heaping coals of fire on his head. Such mercy reflects God's own character, who rewards those who act righteously even toward those who wrong them. Gossip, however, destroys peace just as surely as a storm brings rain, while a quarrelsome spirit poisons the home. It is said to be better to live alone on the corner of a roof than to share a house with a contentious partner, a vivid picture of the misery caused by constant strife. Toward the end, Solomon speaks of the joy of good news, comparing it to cold water for a weary soul. Encouragement and positive reports bring life to the spirit. Yet, when a righteous person compromises or gives way to the wicked, it is as disappointing and damaging as a polluted spring or a muddy well. What should refresh instead becomes defiled. The chapter concludes with reflections on moderation and self-control. Too much honey, again, symbolizes excess. Just as indulgence is unwise, so too is self-glorification. A person who lacks control over his emotions or desires is like a city without walls, defenseless and exposed to ruin. Self-mastery, therefore, is a form of protection and strength. Altogether, Proverbs 25 offers a vivid portrait of wisdom in action, wisdom that governs speech, tempers ambition, and shapes relationships with humility and grace. It reminds us that true honor is not seized but bestowed, that strength often appears in gentleness, and that self-control is the foundation of a secure and honorable life. These sayings, though ancient, remain strikingly relevant, calling each reader to pursue righteousness, humility, and discernment in every sphere of life. Proverbs chapter 26, The Folly of Fools and the Wisdom of Discernment. Proverbs chapter 26 offers a profound reflection on human behavior, exposing the dangers of folly, laziness, deceit, and hypocrisy. The chapter strings together vivid images and sharp contrasts that guide readers toward wisdom and discernment. It teaches not only how to recognize foolish and destructive behavior but also how to respond wisely when confronted with it. The Proverbs in this chapter highlight the moral and practical consequences of foolishness and encourage the pursuit of humility, integrity, and restraint. The chapter opens with a warning about honoring fools. Just as snow in summer or rain during harvest is unnatural and harmful, it is equally unfitting to give respect or responsibility to those who lack wisdom. A fool cannot handle honor without bringing chaos upon himself and others. The verses that follow paint a series of pictures showing how foolishness manifests and why it leads to ruin. A fool is compared to an animal that must be controlled by force, emphasizing that reason and persuasion often fail where discipline is required. At the same time, the reader is told to use discernment when dealing with fools. Sometimes silence is wise to avoid sinking to their level, but other times a response is necessary to prevent them from thinking they are right. Wisdom is found in knowing which course to take. The Proverbs also warn that trusting a fool with important tasks or wise sayings is pointless and even dangerous. Giving responsibility or authority to a fool is like tying a stone into a sling. It will come back and cause harm. Ultimately, the fool's defining trait is his inability to learn from mistakes. Like a dog returning to its vomit, he repeats his folly. Even worse is the person who thinks himself wise, for pride blinds him more completely than ignorance ever could. The chapter then turns its attention to the lazy, describing him with biting humor. The sluggard invents ridiculous excuses to avoid work, such as claiming there is a lion in the street. He turns on his bed like a door on its hinges, moving but going nowhere. His laziness is so extreme that he cannot even lift food to his mouth. The picture is both comical and tragic, showing how idleness leads to absurd self-destruction. Worse still, the lazy man believes he is wiser than others, refusing advice and defending his inactivity as wisdom. The lesson is that laziness dulls both mind and spirit, leaving a person trapped in endless excuses and self-deception. Following this, Proverbs 26 warns against those who meddle in matters that do not concern them and those who deceive others. Interfering in someone else's conflict is compared to grabbing a dog by the ears, a sure way to get bitten. Likewise, a person who deceives his neighbor and later claims he was only joking is likened to a madman hurling dangerous weapons at random. These images show that reckless words and actions, even when disguised as humor, can bring serious harm. The proverbs that follow explain that gossip and contentiousness are like fuel to a fire. Remove them, and conflict dies out. The gossip's words may seem delicious to the listener, but they sink deep and do lasting damage. This passage exposes how easily human speech can destroy peace, showing that wisdom often lies in silence and self-control. The final section of the chapter addresses hypocrisy and deceit. It describes those who hide hatred behind flattering words and a pleasant demeanor. Their smooth speech is compared to cheap pottery covered with a thin layer of silver to make it look valuable. Though deceit may succeed temporarily, it cannot remain hidden forever. Sooner or later, the truth will come to light. The chapter closes with a reminder of divine justice. Those who plot harm against others will find their own schemes turned against them. The one who digs a pit for someone else will fall into it himself, and the one who rolls a stone to injure another will have it roll back upon him. False speech and flattery ultimately destroy both the deceiver and the deceived, for they are rooted in hatred rather than love. Altogether, Proverbs 26 serves as a mirror that reflects the folly and corruption of the human heart. It exposes the fool who repeats mistakes, the lazy person who refuses to act, the gossip who spreads strife, and the hypocrite who conceals malice under a mask of kindness. Each character embodies a form of self-deception that leads to ruin. The wisdom of this chapter lies in its realism. It understands how easily people fall into these patterns and how costly they become. Its ultimate call is for discernment, humility, and integrity. To live wisely is to recognize folly for what it is, avoid its traps, and conduct oneself with restraint, truthfulness, and reverence for God. Proverbs chapter 27, Wisdom in Life, Friendship, and Character. Proverbs 27 offers profound insights into the nature of human life, relationships, and character, emphasizing wisdom, prudence, and humility as the foundations for a well-lived life. The chapter begins with a warning against boasting about the future, reminding us that the uncertainty of life renders self-promotion and overconfidence foolish. True honor, it suggests, comes not from our own words but from the recognition of others, underscoring the importance of humility and the danger of self-aggrandizement. Closely tied to this is the discussion of human emotions. Anger and wrath are described as burdens heavier than stone or sand, and jealousy is an unstoppable force, illustrating the destructive power of unchecked feelings. The chapter emphasizes that managing emotions is essential, as they can dominate our lives if left unrestrained. Equally important are the truths it teaches about friendship and human interaction. Open and honest correction from a true friend is far more valuable than flattery from a deceitful person, because genuine guidance strengthens and protects, while false kindness can harm. Similarly, friendships provide delight and counsel, much like perfume and ointment refresh the heart. Yet, proximity and reliability are critical. A neighbor nearby may be more helpful in times of need than a distant brother. Wisdom, foresight, and prudence are also recurring themes, illustrated in the advice to anticipate trouble and act cautiously, thereby protecting oneself and honoring those who mentor or guide us. Practical wisdom extends to everyday life and work as well. Just as iron sharpens iron, so human relationships refine and improve character. Patience, diligence, and attention to one's responsibilities ensure sustenance and honor, much like tending flocks guarantees provision. The text also underscores the persistent nature of human desire and folly. People are rarely satisfied, and foolishness is resistant to correction, yet a person's character is revealed through their actions and the opinions of others, just as refined metal is tested in fire. These observations highlight the need for self-awareness and disciplined living. Throughout the chapter, Proverbs 27 interweaves moral, emotional, and practical wisdom, presenting a holistic vision of life. It emphasizes the value of humility over pride, the necessity of controlling destructive emotions, the power of genuine friendship, the rewards of diligence and foresight, and the enduring importance of character. In essence, it teaches that a wise life is not merely about knowledge, but about the thoughtful application of that knowledge to relationships, work, and the choices that shape daily living. By attending carefully to these principles, one cultivates stability, meaningful connections, and lasting satisfaction in the midst of life's uncertainty. Proverbs chapter 28, the rewards of integrity and the perils of wickedness. Proverbs 28 presents a vivid contrast between the righteous and the wicked, emphasizing the profound impact of moral character, obedience to God's law, and integrity on both personal life and society. The chapter begins with a striking observation: the wicked live in fear, fleeing even when no one pursues them, while the righteous are bold as a lion. This boldness is rooted in a clear conscience and trust in God, whereas wickedness breeds constant anxiety and instability. Similarly, the state of a society is closely tied to the character of its leaders. Where sin prevails, rulers are numerous and ineffective, but wisdom and understanding in leadership sustain justice and bring lasting benefit. The chapter consistently underscores the value of justice and integrity over wealth or social status. Oppressing the poor is compared to a driving rain that leaves no food, illustrating the destructive consequences of exploiting the vulnerable. Those who forsake God's law often admire the wicked, while those who seek the Lord gain understanding and discernment. Integrity, even in poverty, is portrayed as superior to riches obtained through deceit or wrongdoing. This theme reinforces the idea that moral character shapes life more profoundly than material possessions. Obedience to God's law also honors one's family and preserves one's reputation, whereas ignoring it corrupts prayer and wisdom. True understanding, humility, and the pursuit of justice are therefore central to a life that flourishes. Righteousness not only influences individual character but also affects societal dynamics. When the righteous rejoice, they bring glory, while the rise of the wicked causes fear and concealment among the people. Confession and repentance lead to mercy, while hiding sin results in failure. Reverence for God provides stability, whereas a hardened heart leads to calamity. The chapter repeatedly highlights the consequences of leadership choices, work ethic, and the pursuit of wealth. Wicked or foolish rulers oppress, while those who despise greed and embrace understanding prolong their days. Violence, laziness, and greed result in downfall, whereas diligence, faithfulness, and trust in God bring abundance and blessing. Generosity, fairness, and humility are central themes in Proverbs 28. Partiality and greed may offer temporary gain but ultimately lead to moral compromise and poverty. Honest rebuke is more beneficial than flattery, and disrespect toward parents or reliance on one's own understanding leads to ruin. Conversely, trusting in God, walking wisely, and giving to the poor secure provision and favor. The chapter concludes with a powerful observation that underscores the ultimate reversal of fortune. The wicked may cause fear, but their demise allows the righteous to flourish. In essence, Proverbs 28 teaches that moral courage, integrity, humility, and reliance on God produce enduring security, prosperity, and peace, while selfishness, pride, and lawlessness lead to fear, instability, and destruction. Wealth and position are fleeting if divorced from righteousness, and personal and societal well-being are deeply connected to ethical conduct and obedience to God. By repeatedly contrasting the outcomes of the righteous and the wicked, the chapter conveys a timeless message: character determines destiny, and living in accordance with God's principles is the surest path to a flourishing life. Proverbs chapter 29, the way of the righteous and the wicked. Proverbs 29 presents a compelling exploration of human behavior, leadership, and the enduring value of wisdom and righteousness. The chapter opens with a warning about stubbornness, noting that those who resist correction will face sudden and irreversible ruin. This immediately sets the tone, emphasizing the importance of humility and the willingness to learn from guidance. It highlights the profound impact of leadership on society, illustrating that when righteous individuals govern, the people rejoice, but when wicked rulers are in power, suffering and groaning prevail. In the personal sphere, the pursuit of wisdom brings joy to family, whereas the indulgence in foolish companionship and sinful behavior results in the loss of wealth and well-being. Throughout the chapter, there is a strong focus on justice, integrity, and self-control. Leaders who act with fairness strengthen the land, while bribery and deceit undermine it. Flattery, too, is presented as a dangerous snare, capturing those who are naive or indulgent. The contrast between the righteous and the wicked is striking. The wicked are ensnared by their own transgressions, while the righteous act with consideration for others, especially the poor, and find joy in life. Wisdom allows one to prevent or diffuse conflict, whereas foolishness often leads to strife, as fools are unable to contain their emotions and tend to vent impulsively. The righteous seek the well-being of others, but the bloodthirsty or the foolish act destructively. Discipline and correction are consistently praised as essential for growth and stability. The chapter underscores that both parental correction and societal guidance create conditions for lasting peace and joy. Rod and rebuke bring wisdom, and correction of children brings delight to the soul, contrasting sharply with the shame brought about by neglect or indulgence. Leadership, too, is shaped by the moral character of the ruler. A fair and discerning leader promotes societal welfare, while one who is corrupt spreads wickedness throughout the land. Even in a world where the wicked multiply, the righteous ultimately prevail, illustrating the enduring power of justice and moral integrity. The text also emphasizes the importance of following divine law and exercising self-restraint. Where there is no guidance or revelation, people abandon restraint and chaos prevails, but happiness comes to those who keep the law. Mere words are insufficient to correct a servant or an errant person. Careful instruction, guidance, and discipline are required. Patience, humility, and trust in God are highlighted as safeguards against the instability of life. Pride leads to downfall, anger stirs conflict, and indulgence without accountability brings long-term consequences, whereas humility and faithful nurture lead to honor and security. Ultimately, Proverbs 29 presents a vivid contrast between the righteous and the wicked, showing that their paths are fundamentally opposed. Human attempts to gain favor or manipulate circumstances cannot replace the justice of God, and those who are upright will inevitably clash with the morally corrupt. The chapter teaches that wisdom, justice, humility, and obedience to God's law are not abstract ideals but practical tools that govern personal behavior, social stability, and leadership. It urges readers to embrace correction, cultivate self-control, act justly, and trust in God, illustrating that the pursuit of righteousness is both a personal responsibility and a societal necessity. Proverbs chapter 30, Agga's reflections on life and God's wisdom. Proverbs 30, attributed to Agga son of Jakeh, is a profound and compact reflection on human limitation, moral conduct, and practical wisdom. Agga begins with a striking admission of his own ignorance, declaring himself more stupid than any man and lacking understanding. From the outset, he emphasizes the contrast between human knowledge and the incomprehensible nature of God. Through rhetorical questions, he marvels at God's power in creation, asking who has ascended into heaven, gathered the wind, or bound the waters. He even questions the knowledge of God's name and his Son's name, highlighting that divine reality is ultimately mysterious and beyond human grasp. This opening sets the tone of humility and awe, teaching that true wisdom begins with recognizing our limitations. Following this acknowledgement of human inadequacy, Agga praises the purity and reliability of God's word. He affirms that every word of God is trustworthy and serves as a shield to those who place their trust in him, warning against adding to or distorting God's words. Such integrity in following divine instruction is presented as essential to a righteous life. Agga then turns to a personal prayer, requesting freedom from falsehood and lies and asking for neither poverty nor riches. This prayer reflects a desire for moderation and moral integrity, recognizing that wealth may lead to pride and forgetfulness of God, while poverty may tempt one to dishonesty. In asking for contentment with what is provided, Agga underscores the value of a humble dependence on God. The chapter moves into reflections on human behavior and social morality. Agga warns against mistreating servants and critiques the moral failings of various generations, those who curse their parents, those who are self-righteous yet morally corrupt, and those who exploit the poor. He uses vivid imagery to describe insatiable desires, comparing greed and unfulfilled longing to the leech, the grave, the barren womb, the earth, and fire, emphasizing that unchecked desire leads to disorder. Similarly, he highlights the consequences of disrespect and immorality, noting that those who mock or scorn their parents, or who pursue adultery under the guise of innocence, invite calamity. He juxtaposes these warnings with reflections on the mysteries of life, such as the flight of an eagle, the movement of a serpent, the navigation of a ship, and the pursuit of a virgin, suggesting that human understanding is limited even in observing the natural and social worlds. Aga continues by observing social disruption, noting that the earth is unsettled by servants who rise to power, fools who are filled with food, hateful women who are married, and disloyal maidservants who succeed their mistresses. These examples illustrate the chaos that can arise when natural order and moral boundaries are violated. In contrast, he points to wisdom in the natural world, noting that small creatures such as ants, rock badgers, locusts, and spiders, though weak and powerless, display remarkable foresight, organization, and survival skills. Similarly, majestic and confident creatures, the lion, the greyhound, the male goat, and a king with his troops, exemplify dignity, courage, and leadership, highlighting the value of strength combined with awareness. The chapter concludes with a call for prudence and self-control. Aga advises that if one has acted foolishly or devised evil, restraint in speech is crucial, warning that unchecked anger leads to strife just as churning milk produces butter or wringing the nose produces blood. This metaphor reinforces the importance of managing one's emotions and words to prevent unnecessary conflict. Overall, Proverbs 30 presents a balanced and nuanced view of wisdom. It emphasizes humility before God, trust in His word, moderation in life, moral and social awareness, observation of nature and society, and self-control. Aga's reflections combine personal prayer, practical advice, and keen observation, offering a timeless guide for living a life marked by integrity, prudence, and reverence for the divine. Proverbs chapter 31, Wisdom in Leadership and Virtue. Proverbs 31 is a profound chapter of the Bible that presents two complementary visions of wisdom, one for public leadership and the other for personal virtue. The first portion, encompassing the words of King Lemuel's mother, offers guidance for rulers and those in positions of authority. Through her counsel, Lemuel is reminded to avoid indulgence in behaviors that could weaken his judgment or compromise his integrity. She warns against excessive attachment to women or pleasures that can distract a king from his duties, emphasizing that leaders must exercise self-control. Alcohol, she advises, is not inherently sinful, but a king must avoid intoxication, as it can cloud his judgment and lead him to pervert justice. At the same time, wine may be a source of comfort for those who are suffering, indicating that wisdom involves discernment in the use of resources. Beyond self-restraint, the mother instructs her son to champion the vulnerable, to open your mouth for the speechless, and to ensure that the poor and needy receive fair treatment. This counsel underscores that leadership is not merely about personal conduct but about moral responsibility and the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. The latter portion of Proverbs 31 shifts focus from the public sphere of leadership to the domestic and personal virtues of a woman described as the virtuous wife. This section, composed as an acrostic poem, celebrates a woman whose worth is far beyond material wealth, emphasizing character, diligence, and reverence for God. She is depicted as industrious and resourceful, managing her household with skill and foresight, seeking materials, investing in property, and producing goods for the marketplace. At the same time, she is compassionate, extending her care to the poor and needy, ensuring the well-being of her family, and demonstrating kindness and wisdom in her speech. Her strength and diligence are coupled with moral integrity. She does not indulge in laziness but actively oversees her household and contributes meaningfully to her community. The chapter concludes with the affirmation that while charm and beauty are fleeting, a woman who fears the Lord commands lasting respect and praise. Her value is acknowledged by her family and the wider community, and her life stands as an example of virtue realized through action. Together, these two sections of Proverbs 31 convey a unified message. True wisdom manifests in ethical conduct, self-discipline, and active responsibility toward others. In leadership or daily life, Virtue is measured not by external appearances or fleeting pleasures but by moral character, diligence, compassion, and reverence for God. The chapter bridges public and private life, illustrating that the principles of justice, care, and integrity are essential both in the governance of society and in the management of one's household. Ultimately, Proverbs 31 portrays wisdom as practical, actionable, and deeply rooted in ethical and spiritual values, offering guidance that is both timeless and applicable across different spheres of life. Summary of the Book of Proverbs. The Book of Proverbs is a timeless collection of wisdom literature, primarily attributed to King Solomon, designed to instruct readers in righteous living, moral integrity, and practical discernment. Its central theme is that the fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom, and it presents guidance for navigating life with understanding, diligence, and ethical responsibility. Proverbs opens by emphasizing the value of wisdom and the danger of ignoring it, warning against the influence of sinners and the temptations of folly. The early chapters encourage the pursuit of knowledge and understanding, portraying wisdom as a protective force that guides one away from evil and toward life, justice, and righteousness. Fathers are depicted instructing their children, particularly their sons, to value wisdom above wealth and fleeting pleasures, highlighting the importance of moral character, prudence, and ethical conduct in both personal and social life. Throughout the book, practical advice is given on a wide range of human experiences. Proverbs addresses the consequences of laziness, dishonesty, and immorality, while praising diligence, honesty, and prudence. It provides guidance on relationships, speech, wealth, work, and leadership, emphasizing the benefits of integrity and the perils of wickedness and folly. Several sections, such as the sayings of the wise and the Proverbs compiled by Hezekiah's scribes, offer reflections on social conduct, humility, justice, and the management of resources. Wisdom is often personified as a woman calling to humanity, inviting them to choose life over death, prudence over recklessness, and virtue over indulgence. The text also includes insights from other authors, such as Aga, who reflect on human limitations, divine providence, and practical observations about life and the natural world. The final chapter of Proverbs highlights the intersection of wisdom and character through the guidance given to King Lemuel and the celebrated portrait of the virtuous woman. Lemuel's mother counsels him on the responsibilities of leadership, stressing self-control, sobriety, and justice, as well as the protection of the vulnerable. The description of the virtuous wife emphasizes diligence, resourcefulness, kindness, and reverence for God, portraying her as an exemplar of wisdom in action. Her worth is measured not by charm or outward beauty but by her integrity, industriousness, and moral character, demonstrating that true value lies in the combination of ethical living and practical action. Overall, the Book of Proverbs presents a comprehensive vision of wisdom as both a spiritual and practical guide for life. It teaches that living in reverence of God, acting with integrity, pursuing knowledge, and exercising discernment in daily choices lead to personal fulfillment, strong relationships, and societal stability. By contrasting the wise with the foolish and the righteous with the wicked, Proverbs emphasizes that every choice carries consequences, and that a life grounded in wisdom produces lasting benefit not only for the individual but for the community as a whole. It is a guide that blends spiritual insight with practical advice, offering lessons that remain relevant across cultures and generations.